Classmates, there are only 3 months left until the college entrance exam. My teacher, Li Ming, announced to the room. It's time to decide your future path. Are you choosing the liberal arts or the martial arts stream? He paused, his gaze sweeping over us. If you choose martial arts, the registration fee is 30,000 yuan. Remember to bring it to me in 7 days. The classroom erupted into whispers, but I just stared out the window. 30,000. The number tasted like ash in my mouth. I was a hard worker, and my martial talent was decent. My blood energy levels were among the top in the class. But 30,000 yuan? I was just a student. Even with my part-time jobs, there was no way I could scrape that together in a week. After class, I followed Li Ming to his office. My throat felt tight as I spoke. Teacher, can I turn in the registration fee a few days late? A few days late? Li Ming looked at me, and I saw a flicker of pity in his eyes. I knew he liked me. I worked harder than anyone, and I was ranked 10th in the class. But this was a regular class, not an elite one. Usually, only the top 3 had a real shot at getting into a martial arts university. For a family like mine, 30,000 yuan wasn't just a fee, it was a crushing burden. My parents died in a beast tide when I was 3. Since then, I'd lived with my uncle, Su Guoming. He had 2 children of his own, and both were practicing martial arts too. Supporting one martial artist is hard enough for a normal family. Supporting 3 was a nightmare. Su Hong, it's not that I don't want to help you, Li Ming said gently. But rules are rules. I can't grant an extension. He hesitated, then added, you know, you don't have to go through the exam to practice martial arts. There are always private dojos. I knew he didn't even believe his own words. The resources at a university compared to a private dojo were like heaven and earth. There was no comparison. I nodded slowly. I understand. Thank you, teacher. I turned and walked away, leaving him sighing at my back. As I stepped out of the school building, the sun hit my face, and for a moment, I felt dizzy. It had been 18 years since I crossed over into this world. It looked like my old world, but everything was different. 300 years ago, a star seed fell from the heavens. Martial arts awakened, and the animals of Earth evolved into monsters that ravaged humanity. The barrier of our world shattered, inviting invasions from thousands of alien races. Humanity survived because powerful warriors rose up, pushing the front lines from Earth into the galactic battlefield. When I first arrived here, I had grand dreams of becoming a supreme powerhouse and crushing our enemies. Now, those dreams were being strangled by a 30,000 yuan entry fee. Su Hong, what are you standing there for? Let's spar. A booming voice broke my trance. It was Chen Lin, my best friend and seatmate. I realized I had walked all the way to the gym without thinking. He was waving at me from the steps. I took a deep breath, pushing the frustration down. There was no point in obsessing over money I didn't have. I had to focus on what I could control. Coming, I shouted back. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the moon took its place. The lights of the Star City First High Gym stayed bright. The air was thick with the scent of sweat and the sound of heavy breathing as students pushed their bodies to the limit. Bang! A muffled impact echoed in the corner. Chen Lin stumbled back, clutching his palm and grimacing in pain. Damn, Su Hong, your Vajra punch got stronger again. Don't tell me you've reached the subtle stage? I nodded, wiping sweat from my forehead. Just reached it 2 days ago. In martial arts, mastery is divided into 5 levels: basic, proficient, subtle, great success, and perfection. Chen Lin gave me a thumbs up, his eyes full of respect. We had started learning the Vajra punch at the same time. He had only reached proficiency a few days ago, while I had already moved beyond. At this level of mastery, he said, I bet hardly anyone in class can match you. I didn't let the praise get to my head. Are you done resting? Let's go again. Are you kidding? Chen Lin groaned, looking at the clock. It's 8 p.m. You're made of iron, but I'm not. I need to eat. He'd been trying to sneak out since 5, but I kept him pinned here. Fine, go eat, I said. Come back when you're done. No way. Spare me, man. I'm finished for the day. He started to pack his bag, then leaned in close, lowering his voice. Hey, have you heard of the underground boxing matches? I froze. Underground boxing? It was a gray industry, warriors fighting in pits for prize money and gambling stakes. It was bloody and dangerous. You're not thinking of fighting, are you? I frowned. The thought had crossed my mind because of the fee, but the people who fought there were grizzled veterans or mercenaries who killed monsters for a living. They were ruthless. People died in those pits all the time. I'm not crazy, Chunlin laughed. I just meant we should go watch. See what real combat looks like. You want to go? Maybe, I muttered. He left shortly after, leaving me alone in the gym. I stayed for hours, practicing the Vajra punch until my muscles screamed. By the time I showered and walked out of the school, it was midnight. The streets were empty, the moon hanging high and lonely in the sky. I felt just as adrift as the clouds above. I reached my apartment complex, a cluster of old, decaying buildings, and headed to my door. I was about to reach for the handle when I heard voices from inside. My uncle and aunt were talking. The rent is due in a month, right? My aunt asked. How much are we short? We have to pay a full year at once, my uncle sighed. We're still short 8,000. There was a long silence. I'll find a way. Don't tell the kids. Especially not Xiaohong. She's at a critical point with the exams coming up. I don't want her worried. I froze, my hand hovering inches from the door. I leaned my back against the cold hallway wall, listening. I know, my aunt said, her voice trembling. But the neighbors said the registration fee for the martial arts stream is expensive. How much is it? A few tens of thousands, my uncle replied. I heard the click of a lighter. My uncle must have walked to the window to smoke. Maybe I should stop my medication, my aunt whispered. It's not curing me anyway. It would save so much. And Xiao Hai and Xiao Ming are in middle school now. They're growing. They're practicing martial arts. They need to eat well. I can go back to work. Doing needlework at home isn't enough. Your health is too poor for that. My uncle snapped, his voice thick with emotion. Don't even think about it. You keep up with your treatment. The kids will have what they need to eat. And Xiaohong's fee, she's the most talented one in this family. She has to take that exam. But, no buts, he grunted. I stood in the dark hallway, my heart feeling like it was being squeezed by a giant hand. I couldn't just walk in there. I couldn't look them in the eye. Not yet. As long as I'm here, this family won't fall, Su Guoming said softly. I'll find a way. Just don't tell the three kids. We don't want to wake Xiao Hai or Xiao Ming, and Xiao Hong should be home any minute. I'll help you with the medicated patch first, Shinshin whispered. I stood outside the door, my head hanging low. I didn't say a word. My fists were clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. I took a deep breath, forced a smile onto my face, and pushed the door open. I'm back, I called out. In the cramped living room, my uncle, Su Guoming, was lying on the sofa. My aunt, Shun Shun, held a pungent-smelling medicinal plaster. The moment they saw me, the worry on their faces vanished. They both beamed. Xiaohong, you're back, Su Guoming asked, smiling. How was practice today? Huge progress, I replied with a grin. I stepped forward and naturally took the plaster from my aunt's hand. Auntie, let me do it. Oh, you filial brat, Shun Shin teased, poking my forehead. This is my husband you're trying to steal from me. We all laughed. After the patch was on, Su Guoming stood up and patted my shoulder. It's late. Get some rest so you have energy for tomorrow. You got it, I said playfully. Need me to carry you back to your room, old man? Su Guoming glared at me, his eyes wide. You kid, think you're a big shot now? Daring to tease your uncle? He raised a hand as if to swat me, but I laughed and ducked away, running into my room. That kid. Su Guoming shook his head, smiling. But as soon as he took a step, his face twisted in pain. He gripped his waist, and Shun Shin quickly moved to support him. They walked slowly back to their room. Inside my room, the smile died the moment I shut the door. Our home was tiny, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. My uncle and aunt had 1 room. I shared the other with my brother, Xiao Hai, and my sister, Xiao Ming. We had 2 sets of bunk beds. My siblings shared one, and I took the bottom bunk of the other. The top bunk above me was just for storage. I looked at my sleeping siblings and tried to lie down quietly. But as soon as I pulled up the covers, Xiao Hai's voice whispered in the dark. Brother? You awake? Yeah, I whispered back. I'm awake too, Xiao Ming added, her head popping out from under her blanket. You too. I started to scold them, but Xiao Hai cut me off. Brother, I don't want to go to school anymore. I sat up instantly, my brow furrowed. Why? Is someone bullying you? No way, Xiaohai scoffed. I'd punch their faces in. I'm stronger than Dad now. I want to quit school and help him move cargo. Me too, Xiaoming whispered. I'm even stronger than Xiaohai. I can help Dad so he can finally rest. What did you say? Xiaohai hissed. You want to go? Let's go right now. Bring it, Xiaoming snapped back. I stayed silent, watching them. I realized they had heard everything our aunt and uncle said. Brother, what do you think? Xiaohai asked. I think it's crap, I said firmly. Stay in school. But brother, we aren't talented in martial arts like you. If we work, we can take the pressure off. You can focus on the exams, get into a martial arts university, and become a professional warrior. Then we can just relax and let you support us. Yeah, once you're a warrior, I'm never working again. I'll just live off you. I forced a smile. My heart felt heavy. They were too sensible for their own age, and it hurt to hear. That's enough, I said, rubbing my face. I gave them a confident look. Just focus on school. I've already found a way to handle the registration fee and the rent. Their eyes lit up. Really? Of course, I said, leaning back with a smirk. Do you think I've been practicing for nothing? Your brother is a genius. They laughed, seeing my exaggerated posture. There you go, bragging again. Xiaohai teased. I reached out and gave him a quick flick on the forehead, making him yelp. Xiaoming laughed, then quickly hid under her covers when I looked at her. Go to sleep, I told them. I walked back out and stood on the narrow balcony, staring at the night sky. My talent was good, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. I pulled out my cracked phone and searched for something Chen Lin had mentioned earlier, underground boxing. The prize money numbers stared back at me. With my mastery of the Vajra fist, I had a chance. I had been hesitant before, but seeing my younger siblings willing to give up their futures for the family changed everything. I was an 18-year-old man. I couldn't keep wavering. The moment I made my decision, a crisp electronic chime echoed in my brain. Ding. Host's indomitable martial heart detected. System binding successful. Ding. Beginner gift pack opened automatically. Ding. Congratulations. You have obtained the talent. Eternal unparalleled. Chapter 3. 1 second insight. I froze. A system? I had been in this world for 18 years and had given up hope on such a thing. Indomitable martial heart. I muttered to myself. I realized the system had likely been there all along, waiting for me to find the resolve to risk everything. Being indomitable was easy to say, but hard to do. If I hadn't heard my family's struggles tonight, I might never have reached this state of mind. I took a deep breath and felt a new power surging through me. Everything was about to change. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I needed to focus. I closed my eyes and started digging into this system. As the minutes ticked by, my excitement only grew. This thing was incredibly powerful. To put it simply, if I defeated or killed an enemy, be it a person or a fierce beast, I would earn martial points. I could use those points to increase my blood chi, my physical constitution, or my martial arts proficiency. Open status panel, I whispered. A sleek, translucent screen flickered to life in front of me. Name, Su Hong. Talent, eternal unparalleled. Blood chi, 85 plus. Spirit, 23 plus. Constitution, mortal body 3% plus. Martial arts, Vajra fist, micro level 7% plus. Floating light palm, proficient 35% plus. Skytread step, entry level 56% plus. Martial points, 0. Every stat had a plus sign next to it. That meant as long as I had points, I could level up anything. My blood chi was at 85, up 3 points from last month. I was close. 90 points would make me a pseudo-martial artist, and 100 would officially make me a rank 1 martial artist. But then I saw this spirit stat. My eyes widened. In this world, there was another path besides being a martial artist, the spirit master. They could control objects with their mind. They were terrifyingly strong, and only one person in a million had the talent for it. And yet, this system could actually let me increase my spiritual power. I forced myself to calm down and looked at the rest. The martial arts stats were expected, but the mortal body caught my eye. I remembered reading that everyone's constitution was different. Some lucky people were born with special bodies that let them train 10 times faster than normal. There was a plus sign next to mine, too. Does that mean I can eventually evolve my body into something legendary? My heart hammered against my ribs. I took a second to breathe, then checked the description for my new talent, Eternal Unparalleled. The description was simple but arrogant. The greatest talent in history. None shall stand above you. The greatest in history? I muttered. I didn't feel any different. But then, I tried to recall the problems I'd been having with my Vajra fist training. Suddenly, my eyes snapped open. Every single confusing detail, every block I'd hit for months, it all felt incredibly simple. It was like looking at a child's puzzle. I thought about the floating light palm and the skytread step. A thought flashed through my mind. How was I ever struggling with this? It's so easy. It felt like being an adult asked to solve 1 plus 1. The answers just appeared in my head without me even trying. I had to test this. I knew there was an open space in our apartment complex. I vaulted over the balcony railing and instinctively activated the skytread step. Before, at entry level, I could barely kick the air to slow a fall. We lived on the 5th floor, and I figured one mid-air step would be enough to land safely. I was wrong. As I stepped out into the empty air, it felt like my foot hit solid concrete. A loud boom echoed through the silent night. I didn't just slow down, I shot upward like a rocket. I soared past the roof of the 8-story building and landed on the ledge of the top floor. I looked down at my feet, then back at the ground, completely stunned. Holy crap, seriously? I had jumped 3 stories up with a single step. As I stood there, a chime rang in my head. Skytread step, entry level. Proficient. Micro level. Wait, what? I gasped. I only moved once, and it jumped 2 levels. I finally understood what Eternal Unparalleled meant. Even if this was just a rank 1 technique, mastering it in a single breath was insane. If I could do this with a movement technique, what about my floating light palm? Or my Earth-grade Vajra fist? Would that take 2 breaths? Before I could celebrate, a window slammed open below and a man started screaming. Who's the idiot setting off firecrackers at 2 a.m.? Let people sleep. If I catch you, I'm gonna shove a firework up your. I winced and scratched my head. This sonic boom from my step must have woken up the whole block. Time to go, I whispered. I jumped off the other side of the roof, but this time I hopped down floor by floor manually. I didn't want to cause another explosion. I hit the ground as light as a feather and slipped toward the complex gates. The old security guard was fast asleep in his booth. I looked back at our crumbling apartment one last time. When I came home tonight, I was drowning in despair. Now, I felt like I could take on the world. Just a little more time, and I could solve everything. My uncle wouldn't have to work himself to death. My aunt could get her treatment. My siblings' tuition wouldn't be a problem anymore. I felt a surge of pride. Before, I was going to the underground fights because I was desperate. Now, I was going because I was going to win. A few minutes later, I arrived at a public training ground. It was nearly 3 a.m. and completely deserted. Even though I'd been training all day, the adrenaline kept me from feeling tired. Oh, when did they get these? I noticed 2 new rank 1 combat testers at the edge of the field. These machines measured a martial artist's actual striking power. Rank 1 meant they could handle anyone up to the first official rank. In this world, rank is determined by blood chi, but actual combat power depends on your techniques. Let's see what I can do, I said, stepping up to the machine. I settled into a stance, channeled my energy, and unleashed a Vajra fist. Bang! The machine groaned as the numbers on the screen spiraled upward. It finally stopped at 1027. I raised an eyebrow. Usually, a person's combat power is about 10 times their blood chi. With 85 blood chi, I should have hit 850. Breaking 1,000 meant I was already stronger than a standard rank 1 beginner. That's the power of a micro-level technique, I realized. But I wasn't done yet. The rank 1 movement technique, Step into Vacuity, had already reached the entry level. I wondered how my D-class Vajra fist was doing. I pulled up my status panel and focused on the martial arts section. Vajra fist, entry, 58%. I froze. I remembered it being at 7% just a moment ago. One punch had boosted my proficiency by 51%. My heart raced. If I just kept going, I could reach the perfection level in minutes. I didn't waste a second. I threw myself into the practice, my fists blurring through the air. Asterisk bang, bang, bang. Asterisk the sound of breaking air echoed through the empty field. By the third punch, a massive surge of power radiated from my body. I swung again, and the air seemed to split apart, sending ripples of visible pressure outward from my knuckles. A notification chimed in my mind. Vajra Fist has reached greater mastery. I didn't stop. I poured every ounce of my focus into the movements, my style becoming increasingly fierce and overbearing. Then, I launched one final strike. It looked like a plain, simple punch, but the air in front of me suddenly exploded. Vajra Fist, perfection. I pulled out my phone to check the time. Only 10 minutes had passed. I had taken an earth-grade martial art from basic entry to absolute perfection in 10 minutes. The speed was terrifying. If I told anyone, their jaws would hit the floor. Let's see what I'm really capable of now, I muttered. I stepped back up to the rank 1 combat tester. I settled into my stance and unleashed a Vajra Fist exactly like before. Boom. The machine, which weighed several tons, didn't just record the hit. It flew backward, ripped off its moorings, and slammed into the distant wall. Holy crap, I whispered, staring at my hand. I scrambled over to the machine and tried to pull it upright. If I'd broken it, there was no way I could afford the repairs. Who's there? What are you doing in the middle of the night? A voice barked from the shadows, making me jump. I turned to see a young man walking toward me, rubbing his eyes and looking incredibly annoyed. His name was Lu Feng. He had been sent here by the city authorities to guard these new testers because martial artists from all over the neighborhood had been swarming the area. He usually got woken up at 6 a.m. by the crowds, so the middle of the night was the only time he could sleep. He looked ready to pick a fight. He assumed I was just some kid. In his mind, no actual rank 1 martial artist would use a public training ground like this. He was a rank 1 beginner himself, and the record he'd set on this machine was 12:08. He figured he could easily scare me off. Hey kid, Lu Feng shouted, stopping in his tracks when he saw the machine leaning against the wall. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. Wait a minute. Was that machine always over there? Are you trying to steal the equipment? I'm not stealing it, I said, trying to heave the heavy metal back into place. I was just testing my strength. Testing? You expect me to believe you moved a multi-ton machine to the wall just by testing it? Lu Feng sneered. He started rotating his shoulders, warming up. Kid, you better surrender. I'm the one who set the record on that machine. Don't make me get violent. I'm telling you, I didn't move it, I said, my voice turning cold. I was getting tired of the accusations. I hit it, and it flew back there by accident. Lu Feng almost laughed. Even he couldn't send the machine flying, and I looked like a high school student. He stepped forward to grab me, but as he passed the tester, his eyes caught the glowing screen. The numbers were still there, 1850. His pupils dilated. He looked at the screen, then at my face, then back at the screen. You want to fight me? I asked, my tone dropping an octave. Lu Feng felt a sudden chill run down his spine. His knees went weak. No. No, brother. I was just joking. Pretend I was never here. Keep practicing. But he turned on his heel and bolted. I stood there, completely confused. What's wrong with that guy? I shook my head, figuring I'd just run into a crazy person, and turned back to the display. A combat power of 1850. The perfection level of Vajra Fist was even stronger than I'd imagined. Back in his small guard shack, Lu Feng sat in a chair, his heart hammering against his ribs. 1850. That was nearly the level of a rank 1 mid-stage martial artist. One punch from that kid would have ended him. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, watching me through the window with lingering fear. He couldn't understand why a genius like that was hanging out in a public park at 3 a.m. I didn't care what he thought. I spent the rest of the night training. By 5 a.m., the field was filled with the sound of sonic booms. I was practicing my movement technique, step into vacuity. I kicked off the air itself, soaring like a cannonball from one side of the field to the other. I landed softly and checked my panel one last time. Name, Su Hong. Blood Chi, 85. Vajra Fist, perfection. Floating light palm, perfection. Step into vacuity, perfection. In a single night, I had mastered 3 high-level techniques. I squeezed my fist, feeling the raw power vibrating under my skin. I tested myself again. My power now fluctuated between 1800 and 1900. In this world, 100 blood chi was the baseline for a rank 1 beginner. 200 was mid-stage. 300 was high stage. Even though my blood chi was only 85, my combat power was now equal to a mid-stage rank 1 martial artist. I was still technically just a student, a martial apprentice, but I was ready. The underground boxing matches were divided by rank, and I knew exactly where I belonged. The underground boxing matches followed a strict hierarchy. Apprentices fought apprentices, practitioners fought practitioners, and rank 1 martial artists faced their own kind. With my current strength, taking on an apprentice or even a quasi-practitioner would be like taking candy from a baby. These matches happened every night. I decided I'd go tonight to see for myself. But first, I had to go home. Su-hong, training hard is good, but you shouldn't stay out all night, my aunt said during breakfast. She hesitated before adding, you need to learn how to balance work and rest. My uncle nodded in agreement, his face serious. Don't be so impatient. Success comes from gradual accumulation. You have to take care of your body. They both acted like everything was normal, showing no trace of the soul-crushing worry I'd seen on their faces the night before. Don't worry, Uncle Andy. I feel great, I said, smiling as I stuffed a steamed bun into my mouth. My younger sister, Su Ming, giggled. Mom, Dad, stop worrying. Big brother is as strong as a bull now. He didn't even break a sweat after training. My younger brother, Su Hai, looked like he wanted to make a joke too, but then he remembered the lesson I gave him last night. He wisely kept his mouth shut. It turned out to be the right choice. Before I could even react to Su Ming's teasing, my aunt reached out and pinched her ear. Is that how you talk to your brother? She scolded. Ow! Help! Brother, save me! Su Ming cried out, wincing from the pain. I just burst out laughing. You asked for it. Su Hai watched from the side, looking relieved that he'd stayed quiet. We finished breakfast amidst the laughter. Mom, Dad, we're heading to school now, Su Hai called out. Uncle, Auntie, I'll take them, I said, grabbing my bag. Be careful on the road, my aunt shouted after us. Xiao Hai, Xiao Ming, don't bully your classmates. But if someone bullies you, you hit them back hard. Our family doesn't go looking for trouble, but we aren't afraid of it either. You hear me? Got it, Mom. Su Ming chirped, her voice long and playful. I'm so cute and sweet. How could I ever bully anyone? Su Hai twitched his lips. You don't bully others, but you beat me up every chance you get, he thought. He glanced at our mom, then puffed out his chest and put his hands behind his back, trying to look cool. Mom, I'm the one who does the bullying. Who'd be brave enough to mess with me? He added a silent disclaimer in his head, except for Su Ming. As soon as we walked out of the apartment complex, the smiles vanished from their faces. A cloud of worry settled over them. Wow, look at you two. You've mastered the art of the quick change, I teased, reaching out to ruffle both of their heads at once. Stop it, brother. I won't grow tall if you keep doing that. Su Ming protested. Su Hai looked up at me, his eyes searching mine. Brother, were you serious yesterday? Do you really have a way to fix the money situation? You weren't just lying to us. Su Ming stopped struggling and looked at me too. Brother, tell us the truth. If there's no way, we'll just drop out of school and help out at home. I stopped walking and turned them both around to face me. I looked them straight in the eyes. Trust me, I wasn't lying. I really do have a way. Seeing how serious I was, their eyes finally lit up. They knew that when I used that tone, I meant it. Yes. Su Ming cheered, jumping for joy. Su Hai finally broke into a bright, genuine smile. Watching them return to their usual, lively selves, I felt a weight lift off my chest. This was why I was doing this. Not for fame or power, but to see my family smile like this. After dropping them off, I made my way to Class 6 at Star City First High. The moment I walked in, my friend Chinlin practically dragged me to my seat. Su-hong, have you thought about it? Are we going to the underground matches tonight? I'm not going, I said, shaking my head. Chinlin's eyes widened. Are you serious? You're going to miss out on watching real martial artists go at it. You won't regret it. I'm not going to watch, I thought. I'm going to fight. I didn't tell him. If I did, he'd try to stop me, or worse, tell my aunt and uncle. I didn't need them worrying more than they already were. Quiet down, everyone, our homeroom teacher, Li Ming, shouted as he walked in. Everyone head to the gymnasium immediately. The class looked confused. Teacher, what about morning study? Li Ming grinned. You can stay for study if you want, but the principal has invited a rank 3 martial artist to teach everyone a grade C technique. Are you sure you want to stay? A rank 3 master? A grade C technique? The class erupted into cheers and sprinted for the gym faster than they usually ran for lunch. My eyes lit up. I wasn't afraid of difficult techniques. I was afraid of not having enough of them to learn. A grade C technique. Chun-Lin whispered excitedly as we ran. If I learn this, I'll crush the monthly exams. Heck, I might even be brave enough to step into the underground ring myself. I looked at him, genuinely shocked. He blinked, then punched my arm. What? You don't believe me? Then he deflated. Fine, even if I learn it, I'm not going. Those guys are brutal. Most of them have mastered their techniques to the perfection level. I'd just be a punching bag. He paused, then patted my shoulder with a mischievous glint in his eye. But you, Su-hong, I've got high hopes for you. Once your Vajra fist hits perfection, you go fight. I'll place the bets, and we'll split the winnings 50-50. We'll be rich. He started laughing at his own joke. Pretty funny, right? I gave him a thumbs up. Hilarious. Over at the school gate, Principal Li Chengshan was waiting. A few minutes later, a black car pulled up and a fit, middle-aged man stepped out. This was Chun Tian, an old comrade of the principal. About time, you old fossil, the principal joked. I took a taxi here, and you're still complaining? Chun Tian barked back. I should have stayed at the hotel and waited for you to send a limo. They traded insults for a moment before laughing and bumping fists. Chun Tian was the rank 3 master the principal had invited. His strength was actually a sub-rank higher than the principal's. Come on, the students are already waiting in the gym, the principal said, pulling him along. Seriously? You're treating me like a pack mule. I just got here and you won't even give me a cup of tea. Tea? I got tea, the principal said, pulling out 2 plastic bottles from his bag. Red tea or green tea? Chun Tian stared at the bottled iced tea. He gave a sarcastic thumbs up. You're something else, Li Chengshan. You call this tea. You want it or not? Give it here. Chun Tian grabbed the red tea. A 1-liter bottle? At least you aren't stingy. Anyway, let's talk business, the principal said, his smile fading. How's this batch of students? The principal sighed. Most of them are just apprentices. We only have about a dozen quasi-practitioners. As for actual rank 1 martial artists? Only 2, and they just broke through. Chun Tian shrugged. That's not too bad. Any talented kids when it comes to learning techniques. If there were, the principal muttered, I wouldn't be sighing so much. Chun Tian froze. You mean not even 1? Then why the hell did you call me here to teach? Chun Tian barked. Even if I teach it, barely anyone is going to learn a thing. Li Chengshan, do you think my thunderclap fist grows on trees? This is a grade C technique. He looked out at the sea of students with a judgmental glare. With the quality of these kids, maybe those 2 rank 1 practitioners can learn it. The quasi-practitioners? They'll be lucky to even scratch the surface. As for the martial apprentices, thinking they can learn a grade C technique is a pipe dream. The principal looked annoyed. I'm not an idiot. I didn't bring you here for the apprentices. My focus is on the 2 rank 1s and the dozen quasi-practitioners. Then why did you cram every single student into the gym? Chun Tian asked. Equal opportunity, the principal replied. As the principal, this is the most I can do for them. Who knows? Maybe one of those apprentices has a hidden spark. Chun Tian shook his head, unimpressed. Great. Now you're talking in your sleep. We watched as the 2 men walked into the gym. Every eye in the building locked onto them. Students, the principal announced. Let's welcome rank 3 martial artist, Chun Tian. He's here to teach you a powerful technique. Thunderous applause broke out. I joined in, clapping along with my classmates. Our class was led by our teacher, Li Ming, and we were positioned right in the middle of the gym. The genius class was at the very front, closest to the stage. They had plenty of space to move and practice, a special privilege for the elite. The rest of us in the ordinary classes were packed in like sardines. We could barely move, let alone practice. I saw the envy and jealousy in the eyes of the students around me. The kids in the genius class just puffed out their chests, soaking in the attention. At the very front stood Li Tu and Shin Shan, the only 2 rank 1 practitioners in the school. They looked calm, acting like the world belonged to them. I won't waste your time with small talk, Tian said, his voice booming. Today, I'm teaching you the grade C technique, thunderclap fist. I will demonstrate it 10 times. How much you learn depends entirely on you. He dropped into a stance. The gym went silent. Everyone stared, terrified of missing a single detail. The genius class students immediately started mimicking his movements. Watch closely, Li Ming whispered to us. This is a rare opportunity. Even our teacher was wide-eyed. As a rank 1 himself, this was a massive chance for him to grow, too. Tian began the demonstration. Thunderclap fist is fierce and overbearing, he explained as he moved. When you reach the entry level, your punch will produce a single crack of thunder. He threw a punch. Boom. A sound like a lightning strike echoed through the gym. At the proficient level, you hit 3 sounds. At the mastery level, 5. At the great success level, 7, which is where I am now. Suddenly, his speed exploded. Asterisk boom, 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 asterisk. 7 consecutive thunderclaps shook the air. He pulled back his fist and stood tall. And if you reach perfection, that's 9 sounds. He shook his head. I haven't even reached that level yet. Don't get ahead of yourselves. If any of you can hit the entry level today, I'll be impressed. He glanced at the genius class. Li Tu and Qin Shan were copying him, but their movements were hollow. They had the form, but none of the spirit. 10 seconds to memorize, Qin Tian said. Then I go again. In my row, Chun Lin leaned over and hissed. Are you kidding me? How are we supposed to learn this? The difficulty is insane. He looked around at the crowded space. I can't even stretch my legs. By the time we find space to practice, I'll have forgotten everything. Right, Su-hong? Chun Lin turned to look at me, but I wasn't there. His jaw dropped. Where did he go? He looked left and right, then poked Li Ming. Teacher, Su-hong is gone. Li Ming blinked, confused. He was just here. He scanned the room and caught a glimpse of my back disappearing through the gym's back door. Li Ming sighed and shook his head. He thought I had given up. He remembered me asking for an extension on my school fees and figured I had finally lost my spirit. Let him go, Li Ming muttered. Just focus on your own learning. Outside the back door, I stood in the quiet air and rubbed my chin. Grade C martial arts. Doesn't seem that hard, I muttered to myself. I closed my eyes and replayed Qin Tian's movements in my mind. I stepped into the clearing, found my balance, and threw a punch. A single, crisp thunderclap rang out. Ding! A notification sounded in my head. Thunderclap fist, entry level reached. I didn't stop. I was locked in. I threw myself into the rhythm, my body moving with a fluid, violent grace. Moments later, 3 cracks of thunder exploded in quick succession. Ding! Thunderclap fist, proficient level reached. Inside the gym, the atmosphere was tense. Chun Shan and Li Tu were locked in a silent rivalry, ignoring everyone else. They were determined to see who could master it first. Chun Tian finished his 7th demonstration and walked over to the principal. How is it? The principal asked. Not bad, Chun Tian replied. Chun Shan and Li Tu have the best talent. They should hit the entry level soon. The principal felt a weight lift off his chest. Grade C techniques were notoriously difficult to learn. If his 2 best students could pull it off, his efforts wouldn't be wasted. What about the others in the genius class? Chun Tian shook his head. Unlikely. I see, the principal sighed. If the geniuses couldn't do it, the ordinary students didn't stand a chance. Chun Tian stepped back out. Last 3 times. He flew through the forms. As soon as he finished, Li Tu threw a punch. Boom. Holy crap. Li Tu did it, someone shouted. Li Tu smirked, feeling like a god. He turned to gloat at Qin Shan, but at that exact moment, another boom echoed. Qin Shan had hit the entry level too. I hit it first, Li Tu said coldly. Only by a few seconds, Qin Shan countered. We'll settle this at the monthly exam. The other students in the genius class felt a wave of despair. Even though they were talented, the gap between them and those 2 felt like an ocean. Meanwhile, outside the gym, the air was screaming. Asterisk boom, 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 asterisk. 5 thunderclaps in a row. Asterisk ding. Thunderclap fist. Mastery level reached. Asterisk. I lowered my arms and checked my phone. It took me over 10 minutes to reach mastery. I muttered, wiping sweat from my forehead. I guess grade C really is on a different level compared to the D and E ranks. I didn't stop. I focused every ounce of my energy back into the thunderclap fist, repeating the forms over and over. Inside the gym, the atmosphere had shifted. Chen Tian finished his 10 demonstrations, and Principal Li Chengshan's face fell. His eyes went from hopeful to deeply disappointed. Aside from Chengshan and Li Tu, not a single other student had managed to learn the technique. He tried to comfort himself. At least 2 people got it, he thought. That wasn't a total loss. But it wasn't just the students. Even the teachers from the ordinary classes were shifting uncomfortably. They hadn't learned it either. It was a bitter pill to swallow, being outclassed by 2 teenagers from the genius class. They looked at Chengshan and Li Tu like they were monsters. What kind of brains did those 2 have? My friend Chen Lin had completely given up. He was leaning against a wall, staring longingly at the back door. Man, Chengshan and Li Tu are on another level, he muttered under his breath. I should have just left with Su Hong. This is a total waste of time. Our class teacher, Li Ming, overheard him. His brow twitched, and he opened his mouth to say something inspiring, but the words died in his throat. The reality was too harsh. He looked around the gym and sighed. Most of these kids were just background noise. In this school, only Chengshan and Li Tu truly mattered. Everyone else was just living in their shadow. Maybe I was right to walk out early. At least I didn't have to stay here and feel inferior. Chen Tian, the rank 3 martial artist, was actually sweating. Teaching 10 full-power demonstrations was draining. He walked over to the principal. Not bad, Chen Tian said. Those 2, Chengshan and Li Tu, they've got it. The trip wasn't a waste. I'm glad to hear it, the principal smiled. How about a few words for the students? Then I'll take you out for a big dinner. I'll take the dinner, but skip the speech. Chen Tian waved him off, heading for the back door. I need some fresh air. As Chen Tian stepped outside, he heard the principal's voice booming behind him, trying to give the rest of the students a pep talk about not losing hope. Chen Tian just shook his head and laughed. He knew the truth. The path of martial arts was cruel. The gap in talent only got wider over time. Without a massive stroke of luck, hard work alone couldn't bridge it. He looked up at the sky, breathing in the cool air. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something. In a clearing in the distance, a lone student in a school uniform was practicing. It was the thunderclap fist. Chen Tian was surprised. He didn't expect a student from the ordinary classes to start practicing so soon after the lecture. He admired the kid's work ethic, but he felt a sting of pity. Even Chengshan and Li Tu had to watch him 7 times up close while mimicking his movements to reach the entry level. Trying to learn it from memory alone, without guidance? That was impossible. He turned to leave, but then it happened. Boom, 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 boom. 7 thunderclaps exploded across the clearing in rapid succession. Chen Tian froze. His eyes nearly popped out of his head. He spun around, staring at the boy in the distance. He didn't move. He didn't even breathe. Asterisk boom, 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 asterisk. Another 7. It was flawless. A student. Chen Tian's voice trembled. His lips were literally shaking. I just finished teaching it, and he's already reached the great success stage? Is this a joke? He couldn't look away. He watched my movements, his expression shifting from shock to confusion, and finally, to total fascination. He was mesmerized. He stayed there, hidden, watching me for God knows how long. Then, the air cracked with a sound like a mountain splitting open. Asterisk boom, 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 asterisk, boom, 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 boom. 9 thunderclaps. Something clicked in Chen Tian's mind. A flash of realization hit him like a lightning bolt. He slapped his thigh in excitement. I get it. That's how it works. He didn't want to lose the inspiration. Right there on the spot, Chen Tian began practicing the thunderclap fist himself. 7 cracks echoed. Then, with a burst of newfound understanding, he threw one more punch. Boom. The 8th sound. He had finally broken through. Chen Tian stood still, taking a long, deep breath. He had been stuck at the great success level for years. He never imagined he'd find his breakthrough by watching a high school student in a back alley. Holy crap, old Chen, you improved again. Principal Li had just walked out, and caught the tail end of it. Then his face soured. Wait a minute. You old fox, were you holding out on me? You told me you could only hit 7. What are you talking about? Chen Tian was still dazed. You hit 8? I bought you that expensive tea and you didn't even show my students the full version? Chen Tian snapped out of it and started cursing. You have the nerve to bring up that cheap tea? I came all this way to teach for you, and you're complaining? I just broke through, you idiot. Suddenly, Chen Tian stopped. He looked back at the clearing. It was empty. I was gone. Oh, you just broke through? The principal didn't notice Chen Tian's panic. Anyway, let's go eat. Chen Tian let out a frustrated yell. What's wrong with you? The principal asked, baffled. It's because you showed up and distracted me. Chen Tian was fuming. He actually swung and punched the principal right in the eye. Ow. What the hell, Chen Tian? It was just a joke about the tea. The principal clutched his bruised eye, hissing in pain. You said this school didn't have any top-tier talent, Chen Tian said, his voice low. The principal nodded reflexively. Yeah, you saw them. Chen Shan and Li Tu are the best we've got. Chen Tian let out a cold, hysterical laugh. Is a student who can hit 9 thunderclaps considered best we've got? The principal rolled his eyes. Are you crazy? Someone like that isn't a good prospect. They're a freaking monster. Wait. He froze. His breath hitched. What do you mean? What did you see? Chen Tian explained everything. By the time he finished, the principal's legs went weak. He almost collapsed onto the grass. He stared at the sky like he'd lost his mind. My school has a monster like that? How did I not know? He scrambled up, his eyes wild. You said he was right here? In this clearing? Yes. The principal didn't wait. He moved like a blur, leaving afterimages behind as he sprinted toward the clearing. He looked everywhere until he spotted a student in a uniform walking toward the cafeteria. His eyes lit up. Hey, you, stop right there. He ran over, panting. I wasn't there anymore, but the student turned around. What's your name? The principal demanded. I'm Chen Lin, the boy stammered, looking terrified. Quick, show me the thunderclap fist. Right now. Here? Right now. Chen Lin scratched his head, looking completely lost. Hurry up. Okay. Chen Lin took a stance. He tried his best to remember what he'd seen in the gym, throwing a series of awkward, wobbly punches that looked nothing like the technique. When he finished, Chen Lin looked at the principal with a sudden spark of hope. Why would the principal pick him out of everyone? Maybe he was a secret genius? A hidden dragon? So, principal, Chen Lin asked, his voice full of excitement. How was it? Am I a natural? Principal Li stood there in dead silence. He looked at Chen Lin's expectant face, opened his mouth to speak, and then just shut it. He looked like he wanted to cry. The principal stared at Chen Lin's pathetic display. He didn't want to hurt the boy's feelings, so he just gave a half-hearted shrug. It's okay, he lied, his voice sounding hollow. Keep practicing. He turned and walked away without another word. As soon as he was out of earshot, he burst into a loud, frantic laugh. He pulled out his phone and barked an order into the receiver. Every single teacher, get to my office right now. Move. Chen Lin stood there, his heart thumping against his ribs. He watched the principal rush off and felt a surge of pure ego. The principal saw my thunderclap fist and immediately called a staff meeting. He whispered to himself, his eyes shining. It's obvious. I really am a hidden genius. A suppressed talent. Nearby, Chen Tian, the rank 3 martial artist, overheard him. His lip twitched. He wanted to say something, to tell the kid he was delusional, but he stopped himself. It felt too cruel to shatter a teenager's dream like that. 5 minutes later, the office was packed. Every teacher, including my homeroom teacher, Li Ming, was present. I want the names of every student who left the gym early today, Principal Li demanded, his voice low and serious. The teachers exchanged nervous glances. Li Ming hesitated before speaking up. Principal, are you planning to punish them? Because if so, he thought of me. He knew why I was struggling. He didn't want to add more weight to my shoulders. Punish them. The principal's face broke into a wild grin. I'm thrilled. We have a monster in our school. Someone performed the thunderclap fist with 9 echoes. The room went dead silent. The teachers' hearts skipped a beat. 9 echoes? Even the genius student Chen Shan could barely grasp the basics after 10 viewings. This was unheard of. Li Ming let out a breath of relief. If it wasn't a punishment, then his students were safe. Let's start with you, Li Ming, the principal said, pointing a finger. Anyone from your class leave early? Just one, Li Ming replied. A boy named Su Hong. The principal's eyes lit up. Su Hong, tell me about him. Has he been acting strange? Is he the quiet type? Reserved? Hiding his strength? Li Ming thought for a moment. He's definitely steady. Calm. But as for strange, well, he's been stressed about the 30,000 yuan registration fee for the martial arts exam. He even asked me for an extension because he couldn't afford it. He's been pretty depressed lately. The principal's excitement vanished instantly. His face soured. Forget it. A genius who can hit 9 echoes in an afternoon wouldn't be crying over 30,000 yuan. With that kind of talent, he could walk into any underground ring and make that in an hour. Next, he paused, looking back at Li Ming. Actually, if that kid is struggling, give him the extension. I'll approve it. Thank you, Principal, Li Ming said, relieved for me. Meanwhile, I was sitting in the cafeteria, shoveling food into my mouth while staring at my system panel. My stats had jumped. My blood chi was at 85, and my thunderclap fist had reached the perfect realm, joining my other skills. I needed martial points to keep growing. The system told me I could earn them by defeating opponents. If that was the case, the underground fighters would be my perfect prey. I finished my meal, fueling up for the night ahead. Back in class, Chen Lin was distracted. He kept watching the hallway as other students were called into the principal's office one by one. That's weird, he muttered. Why haven't they called me yet? The principal was so impressed. He turned to me. Hey, Su Hong, you sure you don't want to come to the underground fights tonight? A bunch of kids are going. Even the geniuses from the elite class, Chen Shan and Li Tu, are heading there to watch. I'm sure, I said, packing my bag as the bell rang. I didn't want to watch. I wanted to fight. 2 hours later, the sun had set. I stood before a massive, dark building. The basement held the city's underground circuit. I had changed my clothes and pulled on a mask before heading inside. The moment the elevator doors opened, a wave of heat and noise hit me. Heavy metal music blasted through the air, mixed with the scent of sweat and cheap alcohol. Neon lights flickered over crowds of gamblers and fighters. I felt out of place, but I pushed through to the registration desk. A sign listed the prizes. A martial trainee win was worth 1,000 Blue Star coins. A professional win was 5,000. A rank 1 martial artist win was 10,000. If you won the trainee tournament, there was a 30,000 yuan bonus. I crunched the numbers in my head. 30,000 for the exam, 8,000 for rent, plus school fees for my siblings and medical bills for my aunt. It wasn't enough. You sound pretty young to be acting this arrogant, a woman behind the desk said, smirking at me. She was attractive, dressed in a way that commanded attention. If you think you're that good, you can try arena guard mode. You stay in the ring and fight everyone, one after another, until you're the last one standing. My interest piqued. Does the prize change? She leaned in, her eyes twinkling with amusement. If you beat everyone, the final prize doubles. But there's a catch. You don't get the per-match win money. It's all or nothing. If you lose once, you leave with 0. You still want in? I nodded without hesitation. She handed me a contestant badge and pointed toward the blood chi testing station. As I walked away, I saw her whisper to a nearby staff member. Go place a bet against this kid. He sounds like a student who's watched too many movies. It's free money. I reached the machine and placed my hand on the sensor. The numbers climbed rapidly. Blood chi, 85, the technician read out. He looked up, his bored expression changing to one of slight surprise. All right, kid, follow me. The staff member led me toward the locker rooms. I felt a bit confused, but he quickly explained that many fighters didn't want to show their real faces. They provided masks and headgear for anyone who wanted to stay anonymous. Thoughtful, I muttered to myself. Inside the locker room, I scanned the options hanging on the wall. My eyes landed on a rubber bull mask. It looked ridiculous, but it was sturdy. I pulled it on, making sure my vision wasn't blocked. I shook my head, watching the 2 horns wobble in the mirror, and then headed to the waiting area. As soon as I stepped inside, a loud bang echoed through the room. A group of fighters was huddled around a combat power tester, shouting and cheering. I stood off to the side and watched. There were 50 of us in total, not counting me. Most of them had power ratings between 1,000 and 1,200. I was impressed. These guys hadn't even reached 90 blood chi yet, which usually meant a power level around 800. Every single person here was an elite. If I were still using my old entry-level Vajra fist, I would be at the bottom of the food chain. But things were different now. The arena gates opened. The crowd of fighters began walking toward the ring, but I didn't wait. I surged forward, my movements a blur as I leaped past them and landed firmly on the stage. I'm choosing Arena Guard mode, I announced. My voice echoed through the stadium. The stadium went dead silent for a heartbeat. Then it exploded. Holy crap. Starting the night with Arena Guard mode. Who is this bullhead guy? I've never seen him before. He looks like a beast. In the student section, Chun-Lin, Li Tu, and the others looked completely lost. They had no idea what Arena Guard mode even was. Once someone nearby explained that I had to fight everyone until the end, Li Tu's jaw dropped. That's insane, Li Tu whispered. This guy is either a god or a lunatic. Chun-Lin pumped his fist in excitement, then leaned over to the others. Man, it's a shame Su Hong didn't come tonight. He's going to regret missing this so much he won't be able to sleep tomorrow. While the crowd cheered, the other fighters in the waiting area were fuming. By choosing this mode, I was basically telling them they weren't worth my time. It was a direct insult. I'll deal with you. A middle-aged man roared as he jumped onto the stage. Friend, you must be new here. You're acting way too. Bam. Before he could finish his sentence, I lashed out with a kick. He flew backward, tumbling off the stage and landing hard on the floor. Next, I said. The man sat on the ground, blinking in confusion. He hadn't even seen me move. He checked his ribs and realized he wasn't actually hurt. He stood up and gave me a small nod of thanks. In this ring, people died or left with broken bones every night. I had shown him mercy by just knocking him out of bounds without injuring him. I gave him a casual wave. I was here for the money, not to start blood feuds. The crowd was stunned. Usually, these fights were grinds. Seeing a guy get kicked off the stage before he could finish a sentence was rare. This bull guy has some real skill. No wonder he dared to pick Arena Guard mode. Suddenly, a loud laugh erupted from the professional tier waiting area next door. A man wearing a white mustache mask leaped onto the neighboring stage. I'm taking Arena Guard mode too, he shouted. The stadium hit a new level of frenzy. It's White Mustache. He's been the champion for 7 days straight. Tonight is going to be legendary. As the crowd roared, a notification popped up in my mind. Defeated martial trainee. Gained 3 martial points. 3 points? I wondered how many I'd need to increase my blood chi. 1 win, the referee shouted into his megaphone. 48 fighters left. Will the bullman succeed, or will someone shut him down? The audience was standing on their chairs, screaming for blood. I blocked out the noise and looked down at the remaining fighters. I beckoned with my hand. Next, a burly man jumped up. He grinned at me. Hey, thanks for going easy on my brother just now. As a reward, I'll try not to hurt you too much. He released his blood chi. The pressure he gave off was intense, just a hair's breadth away from being a professional. He was strong. Come on then, I said, stepping into a stance. Here I come, he roared. He closed the distance in 3 steps and threw a punch that whistled through the air. I didn't dodge. I threw a punch of my own, meeting him head on. The man's eyes widened. He didn't expect me to match his power directly. Fearing he might kill me, he tried to pull his punch back slightly. He shouldn't have. My fist accelerated instantly. Our knuckles collided, and the man's face went pale as a terrifying force surged through his arm. He tried to roar and put his full weight into it, but I was faster. My foot swept up and caught him square in the chest. He flew off the stage, landing right next to his brother. He sat there, dazed, feeling the lingering warmth on the floor where his brother had just been sitting. I lost. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with shock. His blood chi was 89. He was the best among the trainees tonight. Yet I had matched his strength and kicked him out effortlessly. He realized then that if I had wanted to, I could have shattered his ribs. 2 wins, the ref screamed. After that, it was a blur. One by one, over a dozen fighters charged the stage. One by one, I sent them flying. I wasn't even winded. With my Vajra fist at the perfect realm, no trainee could touch me. 5 wins, a voice shouted from the neighboring ring. I glanced over. White Mustache was standing calmly over his fifth opponent. As expected of White Mustache, someone in the crowd yelled, "He's on another level." I turned back to my own line of opponents. I had a lot of work to do and a lot of debt to pay. I didn't care who White Mustache was. Tonight, the ring belonged to the bull. I heard the crowd whispering. They said White Mustache had mastered an Earth-grade technique to the perfect realm, putting him on a level far beyond any other trainee. My eyes narrowed. If that was true, he was at the exact same level as my Vajra fist. If that kind of power was enough to win 5 matches in a row with ease, I knew exactly where I stood. Suddenly, a sharp whistle of wind cut through the air behind me. I didn't think. I just moved. I lunged to the side, and a heavy thud echoed right where my head had been a second ago. I looked up and saw a young man grinning at me. He didn't look embarrassed about the sneak attack at all. My blood turned to ice. That punch had been aimed at the back of my skull. If I hadn't dodged, I'd be a corpse on the floor right now. "Look, it's that shameless Lin Ping again," someone in the crowd yelled. They started shouting about how he had won yesterday's championship by blindsiding his opponents and intentionally crippling them. The referee didn't move. This was an underground ring. The fight started the moment you stepped onto the stage, and the rules were written in blood. Lin Ping didn't care about the insults. He just waved at the crowd with a smug smile. He thought he was untouchable. I moved faster than he could blink. 1 second I was standing still, and the next, I was a blur in his peripheral vision. My fist grew larger in his pupils as it roared toward his face. Lin Ping's expression shattered. He tried to tilt his head and throw a counterpunch, but he was too slow. When our fists collided, his hand didn't just break, it deformed. His knuckles crushed into powder. The sheer force of my strike sent his arm bones sliding out of alignment, driving his forearm bone straight through his skin. A jagged shard of white bone poked out into the open air. He hit the floor on his knees, screaming in pure agony. I didn't stop. I walked toward him with heavy, deliberate steps. Lin Ping looked up, his face twisted with terror. He tried to open his mouth to surrender, but I reached out and snatched his chin. With a sharp jerk, I dislocated his jaw. His plea for mercy turned into a muffled, garbled mess. He tried to crawl away, his legs shaking as he scrambled toward the edge of the ring. He wanted out. "Go on, wave again," I said, my voice cold and hollow. "Wasn't that what you liked?" I didn't hesitate. I drove my foot into his chest. I felt his ribcage collapse under my boot. His body went limp instantly, his heart silenced by the impact. I pulled my leg back and stood in the center of the ring. If someone showed me respect, I gave it back tenfold. But this man had tried to kill me from behind. I felt no guilt. The arena went silent. The crowd was frozen, staring at Lin Ping's sunken chest. Then, the silence broke. The audience exploded into a roar of approval. They were screaming for the bull. In the stands, my classmates were a different story. Chen Lin and the others were pale, some of them clutching their stomachs and gagging. This wasn't a school tournament. This was life and death. Even Li Tu, who always bragged about his lightning fist, was dead silent. This was the first time I had ever taken a life. I stood there, feeling my body tremble. I couldn't tell if it was from the adrenaline, the fear, or the sudden realization of what I was capable of. I took a deep breath, forced the nausea down, and looked toward the waiting area. Next, I called out. The referee glanced at me, a new level of respect in his eyes, and announced my 3rd consecutive win. But seconds turned into a minute, and no one stepped up. In the trainee waiting room, the other fighters were paralyzed. They had seen me show mercy to the first 2 challengers, but seeing Lin Ping dragged away like a dead dog changed everything. They realized that if they stepped onto that stage, they might never leave it. "I'm out," one fighter muttered, turning toward the exit. "He's too strong. It's not worth it." One by one, the other trainees followed him. They didn't want the money anymore. They just wanted to live. Within minutes, the waiting room was empty. The referee looked at his notes, then at me, completely stunned. I had won the inner guard challenge by default because I had literally cleared the room. I jumped down from the stage as the crowd cheered. As I walked into the back hallway, the woman from the registration desk approached me. She was holding a thick stack of cash, 60,000 Blue Star coins. "I didn't think I'd be wrong about you," she said, her voice sounding a bit more playful. "Here's your prize money. Keep it for now. I told her without stopping. I'll collect it all at once when I'm done. She froze, looking confused. What do you mean? I didn't answer. I kept walking until I reached the heavy iron door on the far side of the hall. I looked up at the sign above it, Pre-Martial Artist Waiting Room. She had joked earlier that a trainee could move up to the higher-ranked fights if they weren't afraid of dying. I guess she didn't realize I wasn't joking back. I had taken a casual joke and turned it into a death wish. At least, that's what the woman at the desk thought as she watched me walk away. Most people didn't understand the gap between a trainee and a pre-martial artist. A trainee usually has around 80 points of blood chi. A pre-martial artist starts at 90. On paper, it's only a 10-point difference. But in reality, once you hit 90, your physical body undergoes a massive transformation. A pre-martial artist can crush a trainee with zero effort. To everyone else, I wasn't being brave, I was committing suicide. I pushed open the heavy door and stepped into the pre-martial artist waiting room. Heads turned immediately. The fighters in there recognized me as the winner of the trainee ring. They looked surprised, but then they smirked. They probably thought I was just there to get a front row seat to a real fight. They went back to ignoring me. I ignored them, too. My eyes were on the stage. A fighter named White Fox was currently dominating. He sent his opponent flying out of the ring with a single strike, sending the crowd into a frenzy. White Fox, 13 consecutive wins, the referee shouted. The men in the waiting room sighed. White Fox was a legend here, a 7-time champion. He was so strong that most of the other pre-martial artists were already deciding not to challenge him. They didn't want to be his next victim. What a bunch of losers. A cold sneer cut through the room. I looked over and saw a young man leaning against the wall, his arms crossed. He looked arrogant, his eyes full of disdain. I thought the fighters in Star City's underground would be tough, he continued, mocking the room. I didn't realize a weakling like that could get 13 wins here. The room flared with anger. You've got a big mouth for a stranger, one fighter snapped. If you think White Fox is weak, why don't you get up there and prove it? The referee's voice boomed again. Is there another challenger for the pre-martial artist ring? The arrogant youth, Li Ming, let out a sharp laugh and started walking toward the exit. Watch closely, he tossed back over his shoulder. I'll show you the difference between a frog in a well and a real warrior. On stage, White Fox stood with his hands behind his back, waiting for his victory to be declared. Suddenly, Li Ming leaped onto the platform. The crowd, thinking the show was over, roared with new excitement. White Fox offered a polite martial arts salute. Li Ming didn't bother. He lunged forward, throwing a punch that whistled through the air. White Fox's eyes went cold. He raised his fist to counter, but the moment their knuckles met, a loud bang echoed. White Fox's face turned pale. The impact sent him stumbling back several steps before he could steady himself. Oh, Li Ming sounded genuinely surprised. You actually blocked one? I underestimated you. He closed the distance instantly. Try blocking this. Asterisk boom. 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 Asterisk. 3 thunderous cracks erupted in quick succession. It sounded like actual lightning hitting the stage. White Fox didn't stand a chance. He was blown backward like a rag doll, coughing up blood as he crashed onto the floor outside the ring. The arena went dead silent. The thunderclap punch. Chen Lin gasped from the stands. We had just learned the basics of this technique in school this morning, but seeing it in a real fight was terrifying. 3 cracks meant he had reached the mastery level. Even the school geniuses, Li Tu and Chen Shan, had only barely scratched the surface of the entry level. The crowd eventually broke into applause, but it was hesitant. This kid was a monster. He had dismantled a champion like he was nothing. Li Ming stood in the center of the ring, looking around with a sneer. Is this it? Star City's fighters are pathetic. Compared to my home in Yang City, you're all garbage. The atmosphere shifted instantly. He wasn't just here for the money. He was here to humiliate our entire city. The local fans started screaming insults, but Li Ming just laughed. Save your breath, he shouted. If you're so mad, send a pre-martial artist up here to beat me. He even looked over at the rank 1 martial artist ring and challenged the veteran fighter standing there. The crowd was livid. If a rank 1 fighter stepped down to fight him, it would be seen as bullying. But if no one stepped up, Star City would never live this down. Back in the waiting room, the pre-martial artists were fuming, but they were terrified. They knew they couldn't beat White Fox, so they definitely couldn't beat this guy. Move aside, I said quietly. The group of fighters turned around, looking confused. They saw me, the kid in the bull mask, gesturing for them to clear the path. Hey kid, aren't you the trainee champ? One of them asked. Go back to your seat. Don't get caught up in the mood. You'll die out there. I didn't say a word. I just leaped over them and walked straight toward the stage. Their jaws dropped. They couldn't believe a trainee was actually going to do it. On the stage, Li Ming was about to walk away when he saw me. He raised an eyebrow as I climbed over the ropes. The crowd started to cheer, thinking a local hero had arrived. But then someone shouted, "Wait, that's the bull mask kid. He's just a trainee." The cheering stopped. The confusion was thick enough to taste. People were looking at me like I had lost my mind. I was a trainee challenging a guy who had mastered a grade C technique. It was madness. Li Ming gave me a playful, mocking look. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a response. I simply raised my hand and curled my fingers, signaling him to come at me. Come on, I said. The arena exploded in disbelief. Even Qinshan and Li Tu, watching from the stands, shook their heads. They knew the power of the thunderclap punch. They knew that even a normal punch from a guy like Li Ming would break a trainee's bones. To them, I was a dead man walking. But they didn't know why I was here. I didn't care about the pride of Star City. I cared about the 60,000 coins, and the even bigger prize waiting for me if I knocked this arrogant kid off his pedestal. Even rank 1 martial artists might have struggled against Li Ming. Tonight was turning into a spectacle. Chen Lin watched with wide eyes, shaking his head in regret. He muttered that it was a shame I wasn't there to see this. He had no idea I was the one standing right in front of him under the mask. The referee looked at me with a mix of anxiety and pity. He clearly thought I was suicidal, but he respected that I was the only one brave enough to step up when the actual trainees were cowering. I could tell he was planning to jump in and save me the second things got ugly. Li Ming narrowed his eyes, a cold sneer forming on his face. To him, my finger-curling gesture was an insult. He thought he'd been too easy on the previous fighters, and that's why a lowly martial apprentice like me had the guts to challenge him. You're asking for death, he spat. He didn't even bother with a technique. He just threw a raw, powerful punch. He thought a basic strike was enough to crush me. I didn't back down. I stepped forward and met his fist with my own. The collision echoed through the ring. Li Ming's pupils shrank. His body rocked back, and he was forced to take a step to stabilize himself. I was pushed back 3 steps. The arena went dead silent. Then it exploded. People were leaning over the railings, their eyes nearly popping out of their heads. Li Ming had crushed the white fox easily, yet I had just traded blows with him and stayed on my feet. Where did this genius come from? Someone screamed. Qinshan and Li Tu were frozen in shock. They couldn't believe I'd blocked that strike so casually. Even Chen Lin was scratching his head, muttering that he would have been sent flying if he were in my shoes. I steadied myself and looked at Li Ming. You're pretty strong, I said honestly. But to Li Ming, it sounded like the ultimate insult. A martial apprentice had just survived a head-on clash with him and then had the audacity to offer a compliment. His face turned purple with rage. His blood chi erupted, and the air began to crackle. 3 thunderclaps rang out. He was using the thunderclap punch. The referee tensed up, ready to dive in. But then his jaw dropped. From my side of the stage, a different sound erupted. It wasn't 3 claps. It was a roar. 1, 3, 6, 9. 9 thunderclaps exploded in rapid succession. Perfect mastery. Li Ming started to shake. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. He didn't even have time to react before my fist connected. He sprayed blood into the air and collapsed, out cold before he hit the canvas. The silence that followed was heavy. The referee stood there like he'd been struck by lightning himself. Then, the crowd turned into a riot. People were screaming. A martial apprentice beat a trainee. This is insane. Chen Lin looked like he'd lost his mind. Li Tu and Qinshan were trembling. 9 claps meant the perfect realm of the thunderclap punch. They had been praised as geniuses for learning the move after watching it 10 times. But compared to me, they felt like nothing. I turned to the stunned referee. I won. I assumed the prize money is mine. He blinked, nodding frantically. Yes, yes. If no other trainees challenge you, it's yours. I looked toward the waiting room where the other trainees were gathered. They didn't just stay back. They scrambled away from the door, shaking their heads in terror. Nobody wanted to fight a monster who had mastered a grade C technique to the perfect realm. The winner of the trainee circuit is the bull mask, the referee shouted. I didn't wait for the cheers. I leaped off the stage and vanished into the back. As I walked through the waiting room, the trainees parted like the Red Sea. They watched my back with awe, wondering where a freak of nature like me had come from. Outside, the young woman from the desk was staring at me, completely dazed. I held out my hand. My prize money. She handed it over with trembling fingers. I counted it carefully. 60,000 for the apprentice circuit, 100,000 for the trainees. 160,000 total. In just a few hours, I had earned more than my aunt and uncle made in an entire year. The weight on my chest finally lifted. My school fees, the rent, and my siblings' tuition were all covered. I could even afford several rounds of treatment for my aunt's illness. The woman tried to grab my arm, her eyes sparkling. It's late. We have rooms here if you want to rest. I pulled my arm away and kept walking. Women will only slow down my training, I thought. I changed back into my school clothes, bundled up to hide my identity, and slipped into the cool night air. It was past 9. The streets were empty. I pulled up my system panel to check the damage. My blood chi was at 85. My spirit was 23. My thunderclap, Vajra punch, and floating light palm were all at perfect mastery. I had 67 martial points stored up from the 4 people I'd defeated tonight. The biggest chunk had come from Li Ming. It seemed the stronger the opponent, the bigger the reward. I decided it was time to level up. I looked at the plus sign next to my blood chi. I put in 1 point. A surge of warmth flowed through me. My blood chi ticked up to 85.1. 1 point for 0.1 chi. It sounded small, but normal training would take weeks to get that much. I had 66 points left. If I used them all, I could break through to the trainee rank right here on the sidewalk. I hesitated. If I added too much at once, would my body explode? I decided to test the limits. 2 points. 5 points. 10. When I dumped 20 points in at once, my muscles began to ache and swell. I waited for the sensation to fade, letting my body adapt. Then I pushed more. 89.1, 89.5. The moment I hit 90, my aura exploded outward. I felt a transformation starting deep in my bones. I wasn't just a student anymore. I was becoming something else entirely. An invisible ripple exploded from my body, rushing outward in every direction. Fallen leaves on the pavement caught the draft, swirling into the air like a localized storm. A moment later, the surging blood chi beneath my skin began to settle. It felt calm, deep, and terrifyingly powerful. I was a trainee martial artist now. I clenched my fists, feeling a level of strength that dwarfed my previous self. I closed my eyes, savoring the sensation. It was intoxicating. This kind of rapid growth was addictive. My physical body felt denser, tougher, and more refined. I licked my lips, taking a second to commit the feeling to memory. I didn't stop there. I looked at my remaining martial points and dumped every last one into my blood chi. The numbers ticked up steadily until they hit 91.7. I had gained nearly 7 full points in a single night. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw the name on the screen, Song Fei from the Raging Thunder Dojo. Before I had this system, I worked part-time at the dojo every week to make ends meet. I was a sparring partner. For 100 credits an hour, I let people use me as a human sandbag. Even with protective gear, I usually went home covered in bruises. I hadn't gone every day lately because the injuries interfered with my own training, but I had a scheduled session tonight. I picked up. Suhong, it's almost 10. Where are you? On my way, I said. Good. Hurry up. The line went dead. Even though I didn't need the pocket change anymore, I'd given my word. A man stays true to his promises. I checked my bearings and started heading toward the dojo. 10 minutes into the walk, I passed an open-air martial arts field. My eyes lit up. I remembered this place from yesterday. It had a grade 1 combat power tester. I wanted to see exactly how much stronger I'd become after the breakthrough. I slipped inside. In a small shack nearby, a young guard let out a long yawn. He was thrilled that the training field had emptied out early for once. Finally, he could get some sleep. He lay down, thinking about a genius who had shown up in the middle of the night a few days ago to test his strength. He pushed the thought aside. Lightning wouldn't strike twice. He drifted off, his snoring filling the room. Then it happened. Boom. 9 consecutive thunderclaps erupted, sounding like they were right next to his ear. The guard bolted upright, his head slamming into the ceiling with a loud crack. He crumpled back to the floor, clutching his skull and hissing in pain. Not again, he growled. He shoved the door open, ready to scream at whoever was making the noise. But halfway to the field, he slowed down. What if it was that same genius from before? He hesitated. People like that usually trained at elite schools or private gyms. Finding one here twice was impossible. He calmed himself down and walked toward the testing machine. The screen was glowing bright in the dark, but the field was empty. The person was already gone. Are you kidding me? The guard muttered. Hit the machine and run? What is wrong with people? He walked up to the screen, intending to shut it off. He was cursing under his breath until his eyes caught the numbers on the display. Combat Power, 2023. A strangled yelp escaped his throat. His jaw dropped so far he could have swallowed a light bulb. He spun around, looking left and right like a thief. When he realized no one was there, he let out a shaky breath and wiped cold sweat from his forehead. Thank God, he whispered. He didn't hear me calling him a psycho. He slapped himself hard across the face. He'd almost offended a monster. Then he slapped himself again, the sound echoing through the empty night. Over 2,000 power. That was insane. I walked toward the Raging Thunder Dojo, feeling pretty satisfied with that number. Song Fei was already waiting for me at the entrance. He waved me over as soon as he saw me. Suhong, come on, let's get some practice in. I hired a specialized instructor tonight. You can learn alongside me. An instructor? I asked. Song Fei grinned. It's a grade C spear technique. Pretty rare stuff. My interest piqued. A weapon changed everything. For a martial artist, a good alloy weapon combined with the right technique could multiply their lethality. Alloy weapons and their corresponding manuals were ranked from F to SSS, and grade C was way out of my price range. I'd been meaning to pick up a weapon anyway. If I ran into an enemy with a blade and I was still using my bare hands, I'd be at a massive disadvantage. I followed Song Fei into the dojo. We headed to a massive training hall, over 200 square meters of polished floors and mirrored walls. About a dozen other martial artists were already there, stretching and chatting. Song Fei, you're late, one of them shouted. Did I miss it? Song Fei asked, his eyes wide. No, but you missed the last few days. Today is the final day for the grade C spear training. Song Fei groaned, clutching his head. I shouldn't have gone out partying. I could have mastered the basics by now. The room went quiet. The other martial artists looked at each other with bitter smiles. What's wrong? Song Fei asked. Don't worry about it, one man sighed. The instructor is Jiang Ming, a rank 3 martial artist. He's only here because he owes the owner a favor. He doesn't actually care about teaching us. He just performs the forms a few times and leaves. No tips, no corrections, nothing. We've been here for 6 days and none of us have even reached the entry level. The man looked at me. Who's this? My buddy, Song Fei said. I figured he could tag along. That okay? Sure, plenty of room. Don't be shy, brother. We're all in the same boat. I nodded. Thanks. I appreciate it. No problem. We might not be experts, but we've been watching him for a week. If you have questions, just ask us. Even a little bit of a grade C technique is better than nothing. Before he could finish, the heavy doors swung open. A young man stumbled in, his clothes torn and stained with fresh blood. The young man limped into the room, leaning heavily against the wall for support. He looked like he'd been dragged through a gravel pit. His clothes were shredded and soaked with fresh blood. Despite his pathetic state, he carried himself with an insufferable arrogance. If my teacher is bad at explaining things, it's because you guys are too stupid to understand. He spat, his voice rasping. Stop making excuses for your own lack of talent. The room turned cold. The martial artists around me bristled, their brows furrowing in collective anger. I stayed quiet, but I was surprised. Who was this kid? And why was he acting like he owned the place? Who is that? Song Fei whispered to the guy next to him. He's got a big mouth for someone who looks like a used rag. That's Li Ming. The man whispered back, his voice tight. He's the instructor's disciple. He's always like this. Thinks he's better than everyone in Star City, just because he's from the capital. Li Ming's eyes snapped toward us. What are you losers whispering about? None of your damn business, someone barked back. Li Ming let out a sharp, mocking laugh. Typical. No talent, and no spine either. That was the breaking point. One of the older martial artists stood up, a sneer on his face. You're talking big for someone who just got his ass kicked. Look at you. You look like a dying dog. Where's all that talent now? Li Ming's face went from pale to a deep, angry purple. He stared at the man, his fists trembling as if he wanted to strike, but his injuries held him back. He let out a bitter huff and turned away, limping toward the stairs leading to the second floor. Upstairs, in a private room, Jiang Ming stood by the window. He was a rank 3 martial artist, his hands tucked behind his back as he stared out at the city. Teacher, I think Li Ming went out again, a burly young man named Li Yin said, bowing respectfully. Jiang Ming frowned. That boy. I brought you both from Yang City to challenge the geniuses of Star City's high schools. Spending time in these low-level places is a waste of effort. Jiang Ming was annoyed. Li Ming was already a peak martial trainee. He knew the spear techniques and had even mastered the grade C thunderous punch to the proficient level. To Jiang Ming, Li Ming going to underground fights was like a professional athlete bullying kids in a playground. It was beneath him. Li Yin, go find him and bring him back, Jiang Ming ordered. He needs a lesson in discipline. Just then, the door pushed open. Li Ming stumbled in, looking like a wreck. Jiang Ming and Li Yin both froze, their eyes widening in shock. What happened? Jiang Ming demanded, his voice dropping an octave. Did you pick a fight with a rank 1 martial artist? No. Li Ming looked at the floor, his face burning with shame. He didn't want to admit it, but under his teacher's piercing gaze, he had no choice. He told them everything. When he finished, Li Yin looked like he'd seen a ghost. A martial trainee? He hit 9 consecutive thunderous punches. Jiang Ming's brow furrowed deep. A genius like that wouldn't be wasting time in an underground ring. Are you lying to me? I swear, teacher, I'm telling the truth. Li Ming cried out. Jiang Ming went silent. He had hired a master who had studied the thunderous punch for decades to teach his disciples. It took Li Ming 3 months to reach the proficient stage. Li Yin, being a rank 1, reached the micro stage faster. The master had called them both prodigies. But now, a mere trainee had used the perfect stage of the punch to dismantle his student. It was hard to swallow. Seeing Li Ming's confidence shattered, Jiang Ming sighed and softened his tone. Don't compare yourself to a freak of nature like that, he said, trying to comfort him. Focus on healing. Once you're better, you and Li Yin will challenge the students at Star City High. It doesn't matter how many geniuses are out there. You only need to be strong enough to crush them. Use them as stepping stones for your future. Li Ming looked up, a spark of ambition returning to his eyes. Yes, teacher. He clenched his teeth, silently vowing to find that mysterious trainee one day and wash away this humiliation. When do we start the challenge? Li Yin asked. Jiang Ming thought for a moment. Li Ming needs a few days to recover. Let's aim for the end of the month. The end of the month? Li Yin hesitated. I think that's when Star City High has its monthly exams. Even better, Li Ming interrupted, his voice full of malice. All their geniuses will be there. We'll show up and crush them in front of everyone. Li Yin nodded. Which school first? Li Ming grinned. We start with the strongest. Star City First High? Downstairs, I was still waiting in the training hall. It had been 30 minutes. The other martial artists were getting restless, grumbling about the instructor's lack of respect. Suddenly, the doors swung open. Jiang Ming walked in, carrying a standard-issue long spear. He didn't apologize for being late. Instead, he looked at the men sitting on the floor and barked, "What are you waiting for? Get your spears." The mood in the room soured instantly, but no one dared to argue with a rank 3. Everyone grabbed a spear and fell into line. I stood at the very back, my fingers wrapping around the cold wood of the weapon. Today is the last day I'm teaching the Raging Sea Spear technique, Jiang Ming said indifferently. Watch closely. I'm only going through the forms 3 times. After that, I'm done. He didn't wait for a response. He started immediately. The other martial artists scrambled to follow, their movements clumsy and frantic. Song Fei was swinging his spear like a blind man with a stick. I didn't move. I just watched. In my eyes, Jiang Ming's blurred, high-speed movements began to slow down. Every shift in his weight, every flick of his wrist, and every rotation of the spear became crystal clear. My mind raced, absorbing the logic of the technique at an impossible speed. By the time Jiang Ming finished the first round, a notification echoed in my mind. Raging Sea Spear Technique, entry level. It was slightly harder than the thunderous punch, but only slightly. Jiang Ming didn't give anyone a second to breathe. He launched straight into the second round, then the third. In less than 10 minutes, he was finished. How much you've learned is up to you now, he said coldly. He didn't look back as he walked out of the room, leaving a hall full of confused, sweating men behind him. The moment Jiang Ming left the room, the tension snapped. The other practitioners couldn't hold back their anger anymore. They started shouting, complaining about the blatant lack of respect. What the hell was that? One man spat, slamming his spear down. If he didn't want to teach, he should have stayed home. 3 times? He barely even looked at us. Song Fei stood there, looking completely lost. This was his first day, and while the others had at least seen the forms for a week, he was starting from zero. He turned to me, his face a mask of frustration. I just saw the spear spinning like a damn firewheel, he muttered. How am I supposed to copy that? It was definitely rushed. I agreed, nodding slowly. A normal person couldn't learn anything from that. I was being honest. A normal person couldn't. But I glanced at my internal status panel. My Raging Sea Spear technique was already at the micro level. I had memorized every nuance. All I needed was a little more practice, and I'd hit perfection. The room settled into a dull buzz of conversation. Someone suggested we spar with each other to share what we'd picked up over the last 7 days. A middle-aged man waved us over with a friendly grin. Hey kid, you and your friend should join us, he called out. We haven't mastered it yet, but we've got a bit of experience. We can show you the ropes. Song Fei's eyes lit up, and he nodded eagerly. I was about to decline, but a thought stopped me. Could I gain martial points from sparring? Before I could decide, everyone had already paired up. The middle-aged man stepped toward me, leveling his spear. Come on, young man. I'll keep my energy low. Just watch my movements. He was being kind, moving slowly so I could follow. He lunged forward in a basic thrust. Thwack! His spear flew out of his hands and clattered across the floor. The man stood there, staring at his empty palms in total shock. I had moved instinctively. To me, his strike was agonizingly slow. I had parried and disarmed him in a single, fluid motion, a move that looked exactly like something Jiang Ming would do. Sorry about that, I said, feeling a bit awkward. Then, a notification chimed in my head. I opened the system. Martial points +5. My heart skipped a beat. I could actually get points from sparring. Have you practiced the spear before? The man asked, picking up his weapon with a look of pure wonder. No, I lied, shaking my head. Good grief, you're a genius, he breathed. You watched him 3 times, and you can already disarm me? He paused, his eyes widening as the realization hit him. Wait, did you already reach entry level? The commotion drew a crowd. When the man explained what happened, the other practitioners looked at me like I was a monster. They had been struggling for a week, and I had surpassed them in 9 minutes. Hey, brother, spar with me next. Me too. Teach me a few moves. Suddenly, I was the most popular person in the gym. Song Fei just stood there, jaw dropped, wondering when his average friend had become a martial arts prodigy. I suppressed a smile. To them, I was being helpful. To me, these were walking bags of points. One at a time, guys, I said. One at a time. The next hour was a blur of motion. Martial points +3, martial points +6, martial points +0.5. I sparred with over a dozen people. My points climbed rapidly, hitting 35 in no time. I noticed that since I had broken through to the near warrior stage, defeating lower-level students gave me less than it used to, but it was still a gold mine. Su Hong, are you secretly some kind of god? Song Fei asked, walking over and wiping sweat from his forehead. Maybe I just had an epiphany, I joked. Whatever it is, it's incredible, he said, holding out his spear. Think you can teach me? Sure. The others crowded around immediately. Teach us too, little brother. I looked at their expectant faces, including the kind man who had offered to help me earlier. I couldn't say no. I told them to line up and watch. I'll go slow, I said. Try to mirror my flow. I gripped the spear. As I moved, the air seemed to hiss. The spear was like a dragon diving into the ocean, powerful and relentless. The practitioners whispered frantically among themselves. That's not just entry level, someone gasped. I've seen the top disciples practice. This feels like micro-level mastery. I didn't stop. I went through the form 3 times. With each rotation, my own understanding of the technique skyrocketed. By the end of the 3rd round, I checked my panel again. Raging Sea Spear Technique. Great success. I gripped the wood of the spear, feeling the power thrumming in my arms. I spent the rest of the session walking through the crowd, correcting their stances, adjusting their angles, and explaining the logic behind the strikes. I was actually a better teacher than Jiang Ming. I cared if they learned. Suddenly, a loud whoosh echoed through the hall. The middle-aged man had just executed a perfect thrust, the sound of a crashing wave following his spear tip. I did it, he yelled, jumping for joy. I reached entry level. It was like a spark in a powder keg. Inspired, the others redoubled their efforts. One by one, they started finding the rhythm. I got it too, Song Fei shouted, his face red with excitement. He turned to me, throwing a punch into the air. Su Hong, you're a legend. If you don't become a professional instructor, it'll be a crime. The whole room nodded in agreement. For the first time in a week, they weren't frustrated. They were warriors. Jiang Ming had spent 7 whole classes teaching these people. In all that time, not a single person had managed to reach the entry level. Yet, in just 20 minutes, I had guided 4 martial artists to success. One of them was Song Fei, who had started the day with 0 knowledge. My teaching wasn't just effective, it was transformative. By the time the 7th martial artist successfully executed the technique, I slowly lowered my spear. I wiped the sweat from my forehead, feeling the exhaustion set in. My agreed-upon time as Song Fei's sparring partner was up. I looked at Song Fei. She had reached the entry level too. Originally, our arrangement was a simple transaction. She paid me to be her human punching bag. She had no obligation to bring me along to learn a grade C technique like the Raging Sea Spear, but she did it anyway. I believed in returning kindness with kindness. That's why I had been so meticulous in teaching her. Now that she had mastered the basics, I had no reason to stay. Is it over? Someone whispered. The group of martial artists lowered their spears, their faces filled with a sense of wonder. As I turned to leave, they looked at one another, then rushed forward to block my path. Young man, Su Hong, right? One of them said, his voice thick with gratitude. Thank you for being so patient with us today. Please, take this. It's not much, just a token of our appreciation. I have some for you too, another added, reaching for his wallet. I froze, caught off guard by the gesture. I tried to decline, pushing their hands away, but they were insistent. In the end, I had no choice but to accept the money. When I counted it, I was stunned. It totaled 50,000 Blue Star coins. Su Hong, don't feel bad about taking it, one of them said firmly. With the quality of your teaching, 50,000 is actually a bargain. I nodded my thanks and walked out of the hall as they waved me goodbye. He's a genius, I heard one of them mutter behind me. If only we could hire him for a few more days. They turned to Song Fei. Song Fei, you came with him. You must be close, right? We're willing to pool our money to hire him. Song Fei looked at the closed door and shook her head with a bitter smile. She was the youngest among them, but because of her wealthy background, she had seen more of the world. She knew that the word genius didn't even begin to describe what I had done today. She also realized that I had been the most attentive to her as a way of settling the favor she owed me. Once the debt was paid, I was gone. Forget it, everyone, Song Fei said softly. A genius who can master a grade C technique to the micro level in less than an hour. Having him teach us even once was a stroke of incredible luck. The other martial artists went silent. They knew she was right. They stood there, feeling like they were waking up from a dream. My teaching was leagues better than anything Jiang Ming had offered. Just as they were reminiscing, the heavy doors swung open. Li Yin walked in, her voice cold and sharp. Still gossiping behind people's backs? My teacher taught you for 7 days straight. 7 days, and not one of you learned a thing. Your comprehension is pathetic, yet you have the nerve to complain about his teaching? The insults hit like a physical blow. The martial artists didn't take it lying down this time. Oh, so it's our fault, one snapped. The teaching was garbage. Do you think we're blind to his laziness? Exactly, another shouted. Someone else taught us for less than half an hour, and we made more progress than we did in a week with your teacher. It's not even close, a third added. It's like heaven and earth. Li Yan's face flushed with rage. She was about to snap back when Jiang Ming walked over. What's going on? Teacher, Li Yan pointed at the group. They're saying someone taught them for 30 minutes, and it was better than your entire week. Jiang Ming's brow furrowed. He knew he hadn't been putting in much effort, but he couldn't believe anyone in this small-town gym had a deeper understanding of the spear than he did. The gym owner was a rank 3, sure, but he was a saber user. Nonsense, Jiang Ming said coldly. You claim someone is better than me? Where is this person? Let me see this master for myself. He paused, a sneer forming on his lips. Or did you just make him up? Song Fei stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. He's my friend. He's already left. Jiang Ming let out a mocking laugh. Your friend? Listen, I admit I wasn't being entirely serious with you all, but no friend of a mere quasi-martial artist could ever hope to compare to me. That was the breaking point. Every martial artist I had just helped was now fuming. Song Fei didn't argue. She simply picked up a standard spear from the floor. Watch closely, she said. She lunged. The spear moved with a fluid, rhythmic power. As the sound of crashing waves echoed through the room, Li Yan's pupils shrank. She actually learned it. Jiang Ming was stunned for a second, but he quickly masked it with arrogance. I haven't seen you here the last few days. This must be your first time. That just means you have high natural talent. You picked it up from watching my 3 demonstrations. The room erupted in scoffing laughter. Your 3 demonstrations? You finished those in 9 minutes and walked away. And if you think she's just talented, what about us? Jiang Ming sneered. You? Your comprehension is too low for high-level techniques. Then open your eyes and look. One of the men roared. They all grabbed spears. One by one, they began to perform the Raging Sea Spear technique. The sound of the tide filled the hall as 6 different martial artists executed the forms with perfect entry-level precision. Jiang Ming and Li Yan stood frozen. Including Song Fei, that was 7 people. We followed you for 7 days and got nothing, a martial artist spat. He taught us for 30 minutes, and we mastered it. What do you have to say now? Jiang Ming's jaw twitched. He tried to find words, but they failed him. And since you look down on my friend so much, Song Fei added with a cold smile, you should know he's just a high school student. A quasi-martial artist who had never even touched a spear before tonight. He watched your lazy demonstration 3 times, mastered it to the micro level instantly, and then spent 30 minutes fixing your mess. Jiang Ming's face went pale. Impossible. That's absolutely impossible. Song Fei didn't say another word. She ran through the form again, the sound of the ocean roaring louder than before. Jiang Ming's mouth hung open. The ironclad proof was right in front of him. The group of martial artists didn't wait for an apology. They turned their backs on him and walked out of the training hall in a silent protest. Jiang Ming stood in the empty room for a long time. A quasi-martial artist, never touched a spear, micro-level in 1 night. He muttered to himself, what kind of monster is he? Li Yan was equally shaken. Teacher, they have to be lying. She had taken 2 days to reach the entry level, and she had been called a genius for it. To hear that someone had reached the micro-level and taught 7 others in under an hour was insulting to her entire reality. Then, she remembered something. Teacher, Song Fei said he was a student. Jiang Ming's mind raced through every famous young genius in Star City. He went through the names of the top high school prospects, the sons of powerful families, the rising stars. But no matter how hard he searched his memory, there wasn't a single name that fit the description of the boy who had just outclassed him. Jiang Ming couldn't find a single name in his memory that matched the description. He shook his head, trying to clear his mind. Forget it, he muttered. If he's really a student from this city, we'll cross paths eventually. When Li Ming recovers, and you all go to challenge the geniuses at Star City High, he's bound to show up. He patted Li Yan on the shoulder, trying to reassure her. Don't worry too much. Song Fei was probably exaggerating. Reaching the micro level in less than 30 minutes? Even the monsters at the capital's top academies aren't that fast. He likely practiced the spear for a long time in secret. Just focus on your training. With your mastery of the Raging Sea style and your high vitality, there aren't many peers in this city who can stand against you. I walked down the dim street, the yellow glow of the street lamps casting long shadows behind me. My backpack felt heavy, but in a good way. I had just earned another 50,000. Combined with my previous savings, I had 210,000 credits. I adjusted the straps, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. Rent, school fees, everything that had been crushing my family was suddenly taken care of in a single night. In this world of martial arts, strength truly was everything. If you had power, you had wealth. I looked at the bulging bag and felt a cold determination settle in my chest. I never wanted to feel that helpless again. I pulled up my system panel as I walked. My vitality sat at 91.7, and my spirit was at 23. My Raging Sea Spear technique was at great success, while my other skills like Thunderbolt and Diamond Fist were at perfection. I had 35 martial points left to spend. Back at the martial arts hall, I had focused on teaching others, so my spear technique hadn't progressed. Plus, I didn't even own a spear. I realized I needed to buy a proper alloy weapon soon. The spear felt right in my hands. It felt like it was meant to be my primary weapon. I looked at my stats. The most urgent task was increasing my vitality. Without a guidance technique, relying on normal exercise was painfully slow. In this world, quasi-martial artists are stuck in a bottleneck. You can't absorb the energy of heaven and earth because it's too violent for a weak body. If you try to take it in before your vitality hits 100, you'll literally explode. It was a lesson learned through centuries of bloody history. I needed to reach rank 1. I didn't hesitate and dumped all 35 points into my vitality. Immediately, a warm current flooded my limbs. My blood began to churn, racing through my veins like a mountain stream. It wasn't painful, just intense. After a few minutes, the sensation faded. I checked the panel again. Vitality, 95.2. I was only 4.8 points away from becoming a rank 1 martial artist. I was so close. But my points were gone again. I needed a new way to earn them. Then it hit me. The school's monthly exams were coming up in 6 days. The top 10 students got rewards, and the combat would definitely give me points. But I couldn't wait 6 days. I needed money for that alloy spear now. As I passed a small convenience store, a news broadcast caught my ear. Beast activity outside Star City is increasing. The city lord is calling for martial artists to hunt them down. High bounties are being offered. My eyes lit up. Killing beasts would give me points and money. Plus, I thought back to the moment I killed Lin Ping in the ring. It was my first time taking a life, and honestly, it had left me feeling a bit unsettled. I needed to get used to the sight of blood if I was going to survive this world. The wilderness it is, I decided. Tomorrow, I'd head out. Since the college entrance exams were close, the school let us decide our own schedules anyway, as long as we showed up for the monthly test. Across town, in our cramped, aging apartment complex, my uncle Su Guoming was limping home. He moved slowly, his face twisted in pain as he clutched his lower back. He had strained it yesterday, but spent all day hauling heavy crates anyway. We needed the money. He stood at the bottom of the stairs and sighed, looking up at the 5 flights he had to climb. He felt a wave of powerlessness. After a moment of silent frustration, he gripped the railing and began the slow, agonizing ascent. It took him 15 minutes just to reach our door. He paused, rubbed his face to force a smile, and walked in. My younger siblings, Xiao Hai and Xiao Ming, were in the tiny living room, drenched in sweat as they practiced their horse stances. "Dad, you're back," they chirped. He nodded, his heart aching with a mix of pride and guilt. My aunt came out of the kitchen, still wearing her apron. Seeing him clutching his back, her face fell. She rushed over to help him sit. "I didn't get it," he whispered to her. They had hoped to get an advance on his salary. She looked disappointed but forced a smile. "We'll find another way. Let me get the ointment." Just then, the sound of a key turned in the lock. "I'm home," I called out. My uncle quickly grabbed my aunt's arm and shook his head. He didn't want us kids to worry. I walked in, unable to hide the grin on my face. "Brother," the kids shouted. "Xiao Hong, why are you so happy?" my uncle teased, trying to hide his pain. "I haven't seen you look like this in a long time. Don't tell me you actually broke through and became a quasi-martial artist?" It was a joke. He knew how hard it was to raise vitality when you were poor. I blinked, pretending to be shocked. "Uncle, how did you know?" The room went silent. Xiao Hai and Xiao Meng were so startled they lost their balance and fell right onto their butts. They scrambled up, rubbing their backsides, eyes wide. Wait, are you serious? I looked at my family, my smile widening. I'm serious. I'm a quasi-martial artist now. Su Ming and Su Hai rushed forward, wrapping their arms around me. Their small faces were full of pure worship. My uncle and aunt were beaming, their smiles coming from the bottom of their hearts. They were genuinely happy for me. But as my uncle, Su Guoming, laughed, I saw a shadow cross his eyes. His heart was heavy. Earlier that day at work, he had chatted with some colleagues who also had kids in school. That was how he found out the registration fee for the 5 core martial arts subjects was a staggering 30,000 yuan. Even worse, it had to be paid within a week, or I wouldn't be allowed to take the courses. It was a massive burden, yet I hadn't breathed a word about it to the family. He felt a deep sense of shame, thinking he was dragging me down. He silently resolved to beg his boss for an advance again tomorrow. He had to get that money together, no matter what. Xiao Hai, Xiao Ming, uncle, aunt, come here for a second, I said with a mysterious grin. I pulled the 4 of them toward the dining table. What is it? Su Guoming teased, trying to match my mood. Don't tell me you have a surprise for us. It's definitely a surprise, I laughed. I swung my backpack onto the table and unzipped it. Then, I started pouring. Stacks of cash tumbled out of the bag, piling up on the table one after another. Su Guoming, Aunt Chinlan, and the 2 kids just stood there, frozen. 20 stacks. Then one more. 21,000 blue star coins in total. The small dining table was practically buried under the sea of bills. None of them moved. Their minds went completely blank. For a family like ours, this much cash was something they had never seen in their entire lives. Xiao Hong. My uncle finally stammered, his voice trembling. This money, where did it come from? He looked terrified, scared that I had taken a dark path or done something illegal to get it. My aunt and the kids stared at me, waiting for an answer. Don't worry, uncle, I said, telling a white lie. After I broke through and became a quasi-martial artist, the principal saw my potential. He gave me a special scholarship. I knew if I told them I wanted in an underground death match, they would never sleep again. As soon as I said scholarship, the tension left their bodies. They let out a massive sigh of relief, and their smiles became genuine again. Uncle, aunt, you've worked so hard all these years, I said, my voice thick with pride. From now on, I'll be the one to carry this family. Winning the underground championship was great, and being praised by martial artists at the gym felt good, but nothing compared to the satisfaction of this moment. Good boy, Su Guoming whispered, his voice cracking. He tried to stay composed, but his emotions were overflowing. Auntie, focus on your treatment. I'll earn the money for everything, I told her. She covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face as she looked at me. Xiao Hai and Xiao Ming had stars in their eyes. Their admiration for me had reached a peak. That night, nobody really slept. My uncle and aunt stayed up talking in their room, their voices full of wonder and relief. Meanwhile, the kids dragged me around, asking a million questions. Every time I showed off a tiny bit of my strength, they cheered and clapped like I was a superhero. The next morning at breakfast, my uncle and aunt pushed the money back toward me. They insisted I was at a critical stage in my training and couldn't afford any distractions. They wanted me to keep it all. After a long argument, I managed to force them to keep most of it, only taking 50,000 for myself. They kept trying to persuade me to take more, so I eventually just bolted out the door. I'm staying at school to train for a while. Don't wait up, I shouted back. Walking down the street, I let out a long breath. Still not enough, I muttered. If I had brought home 2 million instead of 200,000, maybe they wouldn't have been so hesitant to spend it. It was time to hunt some beasts and make real money. I hailed a taxi and headed for the outskirts. About 10 kilometers outside Star City sat a martial artist base. It was built shortly after the city was founded to provide services for hunters venturing into the wilderness. Because of the news yesterday, the place was packed. Everyone wanted a piece of the bounty. The entrance was a mess of traffic. I saw martial artists arriving alone or in small teams. I hopped out of the cab and sighed at the massive crowd. It took me half an hour just to get inside the base. The building had massive transparent glass walls, offering a clear view of the wasteland outside. I noticed a crowd gathered around a giant LED screen. Near the exit to the wilderness, Hunters were trickling back in, covered in blood and grime. Most of them carried dripping bags. I realized those bags were filled with the left ears of mutated beasts. I watched as they went to a settlement counter. The staff would dump out the ears, identifying the species and rank. 3 Tier 1 low-level beasts. I heard a clerk call out. I turned my attention to the bounty screen. Unranked beasts, 300 coins. Tier 1 low-level, 1,000 coins. Tier 1 mid-level, 3,000 coins. Tier 1 high-level, 5,000 coins. The note at the bottom was clear. No left ear, no pay. It was straightforward. With my current strength, Tier 1 low levels would be easy pickings. 10 of them meant 10,000 coins. Plus, the pelts and meat were worth money too, though most hunters ignored them because they took up too much space. I headed for the exit to the wilderness, but the line was long. I hope they haven't killed everything nearby already, I thought. Suddenly, a loud, gruff voice cut through the chatter. Move it. Out of the way. I looked over. A team of 5 Tier 1 martial artists was walking past everyone, led by a cocky-looking young man. They were blatantly cutting the line. There were stronger teams waiting, even some Tier 2 martial artists, but surprisingly, everyone stepped aside without a word. The arrogant guy smirked and led his team through the gates. Once he was gone, the whispers started. Damned brat. Thinks he's special just because of his uncle. If it wasn't for Yi Chi, I would have slapped the teeth out of his mouth. I listened in and pieced it together. The guy was Yi Feng, a Tier 1 mid-level fighter. His uncle, Yi Chi, was a Tier 3 martial artist and the head of this entire base. He spoiled his nephew rotten. I shook my head. There's always someone like that. Finally, it was my turn at the gate. The guard looked at me, surprised. Huh, you're pretty young to be heading out alone. The guard gave me a surprised look, but he didn't say anything. He waved me through, and I stepped into the tunnel. After walking a dozen meters, my boots hit the soil of the wilderness. The air out here was sweet and fragrant, a sharp contrast to the city. I took a few deep breaths, picked a random direction, and started walking. I moved through a dense forest filled with massive, ancient trees. My eyes scanned the shadows. I stayed alert, my body ready for anything. Suddenly, the grass ahead rustled. I dropped into a low crouch, muscles tensed. A second later, a person stepped out from the brush. I felt a bit speechless. I had been walking for a while now and hadn't seen a single beast. Instead, I kept running into other martial artists. The outskirts were picked clean. If I wanted to find anything, I had to go deeper. I shook my head and decided to pick up the pace. I leaped into the air, my body nearly parallel to the ground. I kicked off the air itself with a sudden burst of power. A loud sonic boom echoed through the trees. For a moment, I felt like a superhero, flying forward dozens of meters in a single bound. I kicked again mid-air, my speed increasing until I vanished into the deep forest. 10 minutes later, I finally found my first target. It was a wolf, 2 meters long with tusks curved like crescent moons. I recognized it immediately from my school textbooks, a Tier 1 mid-level beast, the ghost moon wolf. The wolf's mouth dripped with saliva. Its oily green eyes were locked onto me, sensing my blood energy. After a moment, a look of predatory joy flashed in its eyes. To this beast, I was the weakest human it had encountered all day. It let out a chilling howl and lunged. Its jaws snapped toward my throat. My breathing quickened, and my body tightened instinctively. That feeling of life and death being decided in a split second made me feel strangely alive. My hands were actually trembling with excitement. As the wolf flew through the air, my mind became incredibly clear. I didn't hesitate. I ducked low, sliding right under its belly. My eyes turned cold. I threw a punch. 9 thunderous cracks rang out as my fist connected. The wolf's abdomen caved in. It slammed into the ground and stopped moving within seconds. I let out a long breath, my heart racing with adrenaline. Then, my face twisted in disgust. The smell of the wolf's saliva hit me. It was beyond foul. I held my breath, reached down, and ripped the left ear off the carcass. I tossed it into my backpack and kept moving. As I walked, I replayed the fight in my head. That duck, I hadn't even thought about it. It was like a reflex. Before I gained my new abilities, my reaction time was never that fast. It felt like my body knew exactly what to do before my brain even processed the threat. It seemed my peerless talent wasn't just about learning techniques. It had maxed out my combat instincts too. I hadn't noticed this during the underground fights because those opponents were too weak, but against a beast, the difference was obvious. I needed to test this again. I pushed further into the forest where the beasts were more common. It didn't take long to find a massive black bear. A Tier 1 mid-level furious black bear. "Come on," I said, beckoning with my finger. The bear lived up to its name. Seeing my provocation, it let out a roar that shook the trees and charged. Its mountain-like body made the ground tremble with every step. It swung a massive paw at me. I stepped aside easily. The bear attacked again and again, but it couldn't even touch a thread of my clothes. After 10 minutes, the bear was huffing and puffing, exhausted. I stood a few feet away, my breathing steady, not a single hair out of place. My combat instincts were definitely maxed out. A mid-level beast couldn't even graze me. This talent was terrifying. Test over. Time to finish this. The bear roared one last time and tried to lift its paw. Before it could, a loud boom echoed. A wave of pain hit the bear. It looked down, confused, only to realize its front paw was gone. It looked up just in time to see my fist expanding in its vision. Its head exploded. I jumped back quickly to avoid the mess. The bear's massive body slumped to the ground, shaking the earth. I stepped forward, took the left ear, and turned to leave. Suddenly, I heard a sharp whistle of air behind me. My instincts kicked in, and I blurred to the side. A long spear slammed into the spot where I had just been standing. "Oh, fast reactions," a voice said. I looked over. A thin, scrawny man was pulling his spear out of the dirt. He pointed the tip at me and grinned. "Kid, hand over the ears you've collected. Do it, and I might let you live." "You don't hunt beasts? You just hunt people?" I asked, my face expressionless. "Young people are so naive," the man sneered. "Why hunt beasts when robbing is so much faster? Ears or your life. I'll give you 3 seconds." I started to speak, but then my eyes landed on his weapon. I smiled. "Is that an alloy spear?" The man blinked, caught off guard. "Duh. What else would it be?" "What grade?" "First grade alloy." "Wait, why am I answering you?" He realized I was stalling and turned red with rage. "You had your chance." "Duh." He lunged, the spear tip aimed straight for my throat. I didn't even flinch. I just looked at the weapon with a hint of disappointment. "Only first grade. Well, I guess it'll do for now." The man laughed, thinking he had me. But just as the spear was about to pierce my skin, his vision blurred. His hand went numb, and he instinctively let go of the weapon. A split second later, a foot slammed into his chest. He flew backward, crashing into an ancient tree with a sickening thud. He slid to the ground, coughing up a mouthful of blood. He looked dazed, having no idea what had just happened. "Not bad," I said, weighing the spear in my hand. "Alloy weapons really do feel better than the wooden ones at school." The man swallowed hard. He realized he had messed with the wrong person. "Look, kid, I lost. The spear is yours. Consider it a gift." "Is that so? You're actually a pretty nice guy," I replied. "Go ahead. Leave." The man forced a smile and turned around. As he walked away, his eyes filled with malice. Suddenly, he heard a sound like a crashing tidal wave behind him. He started to turn, but before he could see anything, the spear whipped through the air. It struck him with such force that his chest collapsed instantly. He was sent flying, tumbling across the dirt. He looked up at me as I walked toward him, spear in hand. "You," he wheezed, blood leaking from his lips. "You said you'd let me go." The skinny man looked up at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. He struggled to lift his head, gasping for air. I looked down at him and gave him a bright, cheerful smile. "I lied," I said softly. His eyes bulged. I could see the pure hatred burning in them as he tried to force out one last word. I didn't give him the chance. I lunged forward, and the spear tip tore through his heart. The light in his eyes faded instantly. His head hit the dirt with a heavy thud. I stood over the body, waiting for the rush of adrenaline or the wave of nausea. It never came. When I killed for the first time, I felt a tremor in my soul, a physical sickness that made my stomach churn. Now, nothing. I had changed. I noticed the backpack the man was wearing and pulled it off his corpse. When I zipped it open, my breath caught. Inside were at least 20 left ears from various ferocious beasts. He wasn't lying about one thing. Killing and robbing really was the fastest way to get rich. I packed the ears away. A part of me realized how much I could gain by doing this, but I shook the thought away. I wouldn't kill someone without a reason or a grudge. I wasn't that desperate. Not yet. I started to walk away, then slapped my forehead. I turned back and quickly searched the rest of his body. Almost forgot to loot the corpse, I muttered. I found nothing else of value. I'd have to remember for next time. I was still a bit of a rookie at this. As I trekked deeper into the woods, I pulled up my system panel. My martial points had reached 38. Without a second of hesitation, I dumped all 38 points into my blood chi. A violent shudder ran through my body. That familiar, surging heat flooded my veins. My blood chi climbed from 95.2 to 99. I was only 1 point away from breaking through to a rank 1, 5-fold martial artist. I couldn't wait. Not only would my strength skyrocket, but I'd finally be able to practice advanced guidance techniques. I looked at the D-grade alloy spear in my hand. I really had to thank that guy for the ambush. With a real weapon, I could finally push my great success level Raging Sea Spear technique toward the perfect realm. But first, I needed a target to test the blade. That night, I found a secluded cave. I hauled a massive boulder over to block the entrance and lit a small campfire. I checked the panel again. My martial points were back up to 32 after a few more kills. It was time. I licked my lips and funneled the points into my blood chi. The moment the number hit 102.2, my body exploded with power. My blood felt like a crashing tidal wave, roaring through my arteries. My skin turned scalding hot, and my limbs felt like they were being forged in a furnace. Crack. My muscles swelled so rapidly that my sleeves tore open, exposing arms corded with thick, bulging veins. It took several minutes for the intensity to fade and for my muscles to settle back into a lean, powerful frame. Rank 1, 5-fold. I clenched my fists, feeling a level of strength that made my previous self look like a child. This feeling, this constant evolution, was becoming an addiction. Over the next 4 days, I became a ghost in the forest. I hunted relentlessly. By the end of it, my Raging Sea Spear technique finally hit the perfect realm. Every time I thrust the spear, the air itself seemed to roar like a tsunami. I could shatter the spine of a mid-stage rank 1 beast with a single strike. I was no longer the soft high school student who had entered these woods. My eyes were cold, my movements sharp and predatory. I looked like a veteran hunter who had spent years in the wild. On the 4th day, I stopped in my tracks. Slithering in front of me was a black jade giant python, nearly 20 meters long. It flicked its tongue, its golden eyes locked onto me. This thing was at the absolute top of the food chain for rank 1 beasts. It moved faster than something that size should. Its tail whipped toward me like a thunderbolt, shattering a boulder in its path. I didn't try to block it. That would be suicide. I leaped into the air, using my skystep movement. Mid-air, I lunged. The alloy spear became a blur, piercing straight through the python's left eye. Blood sprayed everywhere. The beast roared in agony, lashing out blindly with its tail. I smirked, yanked the spear out, and retreated. The python's own tail slammed into its head where I had just been standing. It dazed itself, and I didn't waste the opening. I surged forward again, blinding its other eye. I spent the next 10 minutes playing a deadly game of cat and mouse. Every time it slowed down, I'd dart in and leave another wound. Eventually, the massive creature collapsed, unable to even lift its tail. I stepped in and finished it. My heart was hammering against my ribs. It looked easy, but one mistake would have left me a smear on the ground. My eternal peerless talent was the only reason my combat instincts were this sharp. I looked at the mountain of meat and realized pythons don't have ears to collect for the bounty. Then, I saw it, a single scale on its forehead that glowed brighter than the rest. I dug it out. My alloy spear couldn't even scratch it. This was high-grade material, worth a fortune if I sold it to an armorsmith. I stuffed the scale and a few regular ones into my bag. My backpack was bulging, stuffed to the brim with over 80 beast ears. It was time to head back and cash in. On the way out of the forest, I passed other martial artists. They saw my bloody clothes and my overflowing bag, and I saw the greed in their eyes. But when they looked into my cold stare, they backed off. They knew a hard character when they saw one. But then, A group of 5 blocked my path. I recognized the leader immediately, Yifeng. I didn't want trouble, so I tried to pivot and take another route. Stop right there. Yifeng barked. I didn't stop. I kept walking. Yifeng's face darkened. He gestured to the men with him. A large, middle-aged man stepped forward, eager to please his boss. He had been riding Yifeng's coattails all week, robbing weaker students. He looked at me, seeing only a lone teenager, and grinned. Young Master Yi, he's just a kid. Let me handle this. Most people in this forest were weak. They didn't want to fight, so they just handed over a portion of their beast ears to buy a moment of peace. The middle-aged man stepping toward me had been following Yifeng like a loyal dog. He hadn't killed a single beast himself all week, yet his backpack was overflowing with stolen loot. He was desperate to stay in Yifeng's good graces, and seeing me defy his boss gave him the perfect chance to show off. Yifeng nodded, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. Fine. You take him. Don't kill him, though. Just cripple him. Consider it done, the man barked. He lunged forward, his heavy boots thumping against the forest floor. He closed the gap in seconds, throwing a massive punch aimed straight for my spine. He thought I was an easy target. He was wrong. I had sensed him the moment he moved. I spun on my heel, the alloy spear in my hand becoming a blur of cold steel. Before he could even register the movement, my spearhead tore through his chest, piercing his heart with surgical precision. The man froze. He looked down at the shaft growing out of his chest, his eyes wide and vacant. His throat worked, trying to squeeze out a final word, but blood flooded his lungs. He could only make a wet, gurgling sound. I ripped the spear out. He collapsed like a sack of wet flour, silent and still. I started to walk away, then stopped. I looked at the man's backpack, the one stuffed with stolen beast ears. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed it, slung it over my shoulder, and vanished into the shadows of the deep forest. It happened so fast that Yifeng and his 3 remaining lackeys just stood there, stunned. 1 second their friend was gloating, the next, he was a corpse. That guy was a mid-level rank 1 martial artist. One of the men stammered, his voice trembling. And he just died? Shock turned into pure, cold dread. They looked at the spot where I had disappeared, their faces pale. Damn it, you dare kill my man. Yifeng finally snapped out of it, his face flushing deep red with rage. And he took the bag. You're dead meat. He turned to the remaining 3, his teeth bared. Follow me. We're going to find him and kill him. The 3 martial artists hesitated. They were roughly the same strength as the man I had just gutted. Sure, their friend had been careless, but it took real power to kill someone that quickly. More importantly, a kid this strong at this age had to be a genius from Star City High. Robbing students was one thing, but murdering a top-tier talent? If the school found out, they were finished. Young Master Yi, one of them whispered, that kid is probably a genius. If we kill him. Yifeng whirled around, his eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. The man instantly shut his mouth. So what if he's a genius? Yifeng hissed. This is the wilderness. We kill him, toss him into a beast's mouth, and he's gone. Nobody finds a body, nobody knows a thing. The 3 men shared a look and slowly nodded. Move, Yifeng commanded. They gave chase, but after a few minutes, they realized they couldn't keep up. My speed was on a different level. As the distance grew, Yifeng's frustration boiled over. He cupped his hands and screamed into the dark trees. Kid, I've seen your face. Drop that bag right now, or I swear to God, I'll kill your entire family. I stopped dead in my tracks. I turned my head slowly, my eyes burning with a sudden, violent light. Yifeng had tried to rob me, and after I defended myself, he decided to threaten the only people I cared about. My siblings. My home. He had just signed his death warrant. I didn't say a word. I turned back and accelerated, disappearing completely into the darkness. Screw it, Yifeng screamed, kicking a tree. His men stayed silent, terrified of his temper. After a moment, Yifeng turned back toward the edge of the forest. He took the bags, so he has to go back to the base to cash them in. We'll head to the entrance and intercept him there. Move out. One of the men looked at the darkening sky. Young master, it's night. The beasts get aggressive. Maybe we should wait until morning. No, Yifeng barked. If we wait, he'll slip away under the cover of night. We're going now. They started trekking through the gloom, Yifeng cursing my name with every step. The three martial artists were just as miserable. They had been enjoying an easy week of bullying, and now they were forced into a dangerous night march because of some brat. If I see him again, I'm the one who's going to gut him, one of them grumbled. Don't get ahead of yourself, another replied. If that useless idiot hadn't let his guard down, we wouldn't be in this mess. They kept bickering, their voices echoing through the trees. Suddenly, a shadow exploded from the brush. A spear flashed like lightning, driving straight through the heart of the man who had just spoken. The attacker didn't linger. Before the body even hit the ground, the shadow had vanished back into the foliage. It was too fast, too clean. Yifeng and the others didn't even have time to raise their weapons. They stared at their companion, now a cooling corpse on the forest floor. It's him. That kid. Yifeng's voice cracked with a mix of rage and terror. He realized then that I hadn't run away. I was hunting them. The remaining two martial artists felt the hair on their necks stand up. They weren't the predators anymore. They were the prey. Faster. Get out of this hellhole. Yifeng choked out, his bravado crumbling. They stopped talking. They stopped cursing. They moved in a tight formation, eyes darting frantically toward every rustle in the leaves. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from the left. They spun around, weapons raised, hearts hammering against their ribs. They stared into the darkness for 10, 20 seconds. Nothing happened. I was toys with them, shredding their nerves bit by bit. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. Yifeng muttered, his voice trembling. Why won't he just come out and fight like a man? Right, brother? He waited for a response. None came. Yifeng and the last remaining martial artist froze. A cold pit formed in their stomachs. They slowly turned around. Thud. The third man was lying on the ground, a fresh hole in his chest. He was dead before he could even scream. Damn it. Damn it all. Yifeng shrieked, his mind snapping. The last guard grabbed his arm, his face white as a sheet. Young master, stop screaming. We have to go. Now. They bolted. They ran until their lungs burned, desperate to reach the light of the base. But after a few hundred yards, they skidded to a halt. Standing in the middle of the path, bathed in the faint moonlight, was a lone figure holding a spear. It was me. Yifeng let out a shaky breath, a manic grin twitching on his face. So, you're finally done hiding? You're not going to ambush us anymore. The last guard leveled his sword at me, his eyes locked on my every move. I looked at them, my expression cold and empty. To me, they were already dead. There are only two of you left, I said quietly. I don't need to hide anymore. I wasn't going to give Yifeng a quick death. Not after he threatened my family. You think you're special? Yifeng spat, his voice rising in a desperate fury. I'll show you who you're messing with. Yifeng lunged at me, his body blurring with speed. The last remaining guard followed close behind him, desperate to end this. I didn't back down. I tightened my grip on my spear and thrust it forward, meeting Yifeng's strike head-on. The impact vibrated up my arms. Yifeng's face paled. He let out a muffled grunt and staggered back several steps. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing with a newfound gravity. He was a rank 1 high-stage martial artist. He hadn't expected a student like me to force him back with a single blow. I didn't give him time to recover. Sensing the opening, I ignored Yifeng and pivoted toward the guard. My spear movements became wide and aggressive, heavy with a suffocating pressure. Within seconds, I found an opening and drove the blade home. The guard collapsed. I flicked my wrist, sending a spray of blood from the spear tip onto the grass. Yifeng's expression turned deathly pale. In just a few hours, his 5-man team had been whittled down to just him. Now it's your turn, I said. My voice was cold. I began to walk toward him, step by deliberate step. You think you've won? Yifeng sneered. When we were barely 10 feet apart, he suddenly raised a finger. Die! A sharp burst of energy shot from his fingertip, traveling at a terrifying speed toward my chest. My instinct screamed. I twisted my body midair, feeling the wind of the projectile brush past my ribs. The energy blast hit a massive tree behind me, snapping the trunk in half like a dry twig. My pupils shrunk. I felt a surge of genuine caution. Yifeng let out a jagged laugh. This is a grade B martial technique. The void-piercing finger, My uncle, the base commander, taught it to me himself. He looked confident again. Most martial artists hunting out here came from humble backgrounds and only had access to low-grade techniques. Even a rank 2 martial artist would struggle against this move. You should have stayed hidden like a rat, Yifeng barked. Now that you've shown your face, you're dead. He began firing again. Beams of white energy streaked through the air like lethal ribbons. I was forced to dodge repeatedly, unable to get close enough to use my spear. Peasant, you're nothing but a lucky peasant. Yifeng mocked. He thought he had the upper hand. He didn't notice that every time he fired, my eyes were locked onto his hand. I was watching the flow of his energy, the positioning of his fingers, and the rhythm of the release. I was analyzing everything. A few minutes later, Yifeng fired another shot. This time, I pretended to be exhausted. My reaction was a split second too slow. The beam was inches from my chest. Got you, Yifeng grinned. But then, I dropped my spear. I raised my own finger and pointed it directly at his incoming blast. Zap! A near-identical beam of energy erupted from my fingertip. The two attacks collided in midair, exploding with a violent crack before vanishing into smoke. Yifeng froze. His jaw dropped. What, how? How do you know the void-piercing finger? He didn't want to believe it. He fired again. I fired back, matching him blow for blow. As I did, I tilted my head, refining the technique in my mind with every shot. You're learning it, Yifeng shrieked, his voice cracking with pure terror. You're learning it right now? It wasn't just shock anymore. It was soul-deep fear. It had taken him a full month under a master's guidance just to reach the basic level of this grade B technique. His uncle had called him a genius for it. Yet here I was, mastering it in the middle of a life-and-death struggle. He looked at my indifferent face and felt a chill run down his spine. He realized he hadn't just ambushed a student. He had provoked a monster. He started to back away, firing desperate shots to keep me at bay while he tried to flee toward the forest edge. But my energy was changing. I pointed my finger again. This time, the beam was twice as thick and twice as fast. It shattered his defense and tore straight through his thigh. Yifeng screamed and tumbled to the ground, clutching his bleeding leg. Proficient level. He gasped, looking at me like I was a ghost. You reached the proficient level in minutes? You're not human. I kept walking. He saw the killing intent in my eyes and began to shake. Don't kill me. My uncle will hunt you down, he sobbed, sweat pouring down his face. Wait, I'll give you the manual. It's right here in my pocket. Just let me go. I'll never bother you again. If I kill you, I said softly, it's mine anyway. I didn't let him speak again. I fired several beams in quick succession, piercing his heart and his forehead. He slumped over dead. I didn't feel any remorse. The moment he threatened my family, his life was forfeit. I knelt down and searched his body. My hands didn't shake anymore. I was becoming an expert at this. I pulled a small book from his jacket. Void-piercing finger, grade B. A small smile touched my lips. My innate talent was incredible, but having the actual manual would allow me to push this technique even further. I tucked it away and grabbed the 5 heavy bags of monster materials his team had collected. Each one was worth a fortune. By the time the sun began to peek over the horizon, I was trekking back toward the base, carrying 6 massive backpacks. Suddenly, a mutated black bear lunged from the brush, roaring in fury. I didn't even reach for my spear. I simply raised a finger. A beam of energy the size of a man's arm tore through the air, punching a clean hole through the bear's heart. It dropped instantly. Perfected, I whispered. The void-piercing finger is finally at the perfect level. The power was incredible. I finally had a reliable mid-range attack that was nearly impossible to dodge. I looked up and saw the silhouette of the martial artist base in the distance. I stopped for a moment, thinking about my next move. I pulled the void-piercing finger manual from my pocket one last time. My heart hardened. I didn't hesitate. I struck a match and watched the pages turn to ash. Yifeng, the man I had just killed, was the leader of this martial artist base. He was a rank 3 powerhouse. Right now, I couldn't afford to provoke someone like that. If any evidence linked me to his death, I was finished. Caution was my only shield. Besides, I had already reached the perfect level with the technique. The physical book was useless to me now. I adjusted the straps of the 6 massive backpacks and began the long trek back. The sun was just starting to crest the horizon when I reached the martial artist base. Even at dawn, the place was a sea of people. It had been several days since the hunting season began, and weary warriors were finally returning from the wilderness. The settlement point was packed. I watched as a group called the Thunder Squad handed over 4 bags to the staff. They were well known around here. A crowd gathered to watch their tally. 67 rank 1, low-tier beasts. 12 rank 1, mid-tier. Total value, 230,000 blue star coins, the staff member announced. The crowd erupted in whispers of envy. Thunder Squad is insane. Only a few days and they killed that many, one man muttered. 4 full bags. That's more than I make in 3 months, another added. Even the staff member smiled. You guys have brought in the most materials I've seen all week. The members of the Thunder Squad puffed out their chests, soaking in the admiration. Holy crap! A shout rang out from the base entrance, loud enough to echo across the entire plaza. Everyone turned to look. Then, the silence became deafening. I walked through the gates, my clothes soaked through with dried monster blood. I looked like a mess, clutching my spear, but it was the load on my back that stopped everyone's breath. I was carrying 6 bulging backpacks. They were so full that fresh blood was still dripping from the seams, staining the ground behind me. Are those all monster ears? Someone whispered. 6 bags? How many did he kill? He's alone. And look at his face. He looks like a high schooler. The Thunder Squad stared at me, their pride evaporating. They must be unranked beasts, someone suggested, trying to make sense of it. Quantity over quality. Even if they are unranked, another countered, there are 6 bags of them. And he's just one kid. The skeptics shut their mouths. Killing that many monsters solo, regardless of rank, was a feat of madness. Most people assumed I had spent my time slaughtering the weakest creatures in the forest just to fill the bags. After all, the 5-man Thunder Squad only had 4 bags. I ignored the stares and walked straight to the settlement counter. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. The staff member's eyes went wide. He didn't wait for me to speak. He scrambled over to help me unload. Sir, please, let me take those for you, he said, his voice dripping with respect. The other martial artists exchanged looks. This guy hadn't been nearly this polite to them. He grabbed the first bag and turned it over. Clatter! A mountain of monster ears spilled onto the floor. The crowd surged forward to see. Rage Black Bear, Ghost Moon Wolf, a veteran warrior gasped. My God, these are all rank 1. I don't see a single unranked ear in the pile. He looked at the other 5 bags, his heart visibly racing. The others, they can't all be rank 1, right? That's impossible. The staff member didn't say a word. He grabbed the remaining 5 bags and dumped them all. In seconds, the floor was carpeted in monster trophies. The air smelled of iron and death. The crowd went numb. Not one unranked beast, someone whispered, their voice trembling. They're all rank 1. There are mid-tiers. Wait, are those high-tier ears? They looked at me like I was a ghost. Then, a sharp-eyed man screamed. Look, is that a black jade python scale? The black jade python. It was the king of rank 1 monsters. The staff member picked up the heavy, shimmering scale, his hands shaking slightly. He inspected it and nodded. It is. This is definitely from a black jade python. The plaza exploded. That was a creature most squads ran away from on sight. The Thunder Squad, who had been feeling bitter about being upstaged, went completely silent. They had encountered one once and nearly been wiped out. And here I was, a lone teenager, having hunted it down. The staff member looked up at me, a sudden thought crossing his mind. The python has a unique gold and silver scale on its forehead. Did you happen to find it? I reached into my pocket and pulled out the iridescent scale. Yes, that's the one, he shouted, his face flushing with excitement. The base has a standing high price order for these. Will you sell it? How much? I asked. He held up a finger. 10,000 blue star coins. I blinked. A single high-tier monster ear was only worth 5,000. This one scale was worth double that. But considering how dangerous that snake was, it made sense. Deal, I said. All right, give me a moment to finalize the count. He worked quickly, but his hands were still trembling. When he finally looked up, his face was pale with shock. Final tally, he announced, his voice carrying across the silent plaza. 72 rank 1 low-tier beasts. 83 rank 1 mid-tier beasts. 17 rank 1 high-tier beasts. Plus the black jade python scale. He swallowed hard. Total value, 416,000 blue star coins. The crowd went ballistic. 400,000? I haven't made that much in 6 months. I'm only a low-tier rank 1. It would take me 2 years to kill that many. Is this what a genius looks like? I give up. I'm retiring. The Thunder Squad members just shook their heads. Any thought of competition was gone. They had 5 people and made 230,000. I was 1 person and I had doubled their haul. I was a monster. The transfer hit my phone almost instantly. I checked the screen, 416,000. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had done it. My family was safe. I turned to leave, and the crowd scrambled to get out of my way, their eyes filled with awe. But just as I reached the exit, a massive boom shook the building. A figure smashed through a second-story window, landing in the center of the plaza with a roar of pure fury. "Nobody moves," the man screamed. "Lock down the base. No one leaves until I say so. Not a single fly gets out of here." The shout echoed through the plaza, plunging the entire crowd into a dead silence. I looked up and saw the man who had just crashed down. It was Yi Chi, the head of the entire base. The other martial artists looked around, confused and nervous, as staff members scrambled to block every exit. One man finally found his voice and asked cautiously, "Chief Yi, what happened?" Yi Chi stood in the center of the floor, his eyes scanning the crowd with a freezing glare. "My nephew, Yi Feng, has been murdered," he growled. The room erupted in a collective gasp. Yi Feng was dead? It was no wonder Yi Chi was in such a murderous rage. But as I looked around, I saw something else in the eyes of the other martial artists. They were desperately suppressing smiles. Everyone knew Yi Feng. He had spent the last few weeks robbing almost everyone in the wilderness. If it weren't for his uncle's position, someone would have killed him a long time ago. To them, this was justice. "Starting now, everyone gets searched," Yi Chi announced, his voice cold. "Once you're cleared, you can leave." The mood shifted instantly from secret joy to outrage. "Searched? On what grounds?" someone muttered. "Just because your nephew died, we all have to be searched? That's not right," another man shouted, emboldened by the crowd. "Chief Yi, this search." Yi Chi didn't let him finish. He let out a cold snort, his eyes flashing with killing intent. Yi Feng was carrying a grade B weapon. Whoever killed him definitely took it. Until you're searched and cleared, nobody leaves. A grade B weapon? The crowd went quiet. Yi Chi was truly wealthy to give his nephew something that valuable. But even so, the thought of being frisked like criminals left a bitter taste in their mouths. Still, looking at the fury on Yi Chi's face, nobody dared to speak up again. They knew if they refused now, they wouldn't live to see tomorrow. The staff began moving through the ranks, searching the martial artists one by one. Yi Chi stood to the side like a hawk, his eyes boring into every face. Suddenly, his gaze drifted toward the exchange counter. He saw the mountain of beast ears I had just turned in. "Who killed all these?" Yi Chi asked sharply. Every head in the plaza turned toward me. The staff pointed me out, and Yi Chi's heavy, oppressive gaze landed squarely on my face. When he saw how young I was, a flicker of surprise crossed his eyes. He walked over, frowning. "You're a low-tier rank 1, he said, his voice dropping an octave. "You killed all these beasts yourself?" He paused, his tone turning icy. "I think you killed my nephew and robbed his bag. You were bold enough to come back here and settle the loot, weren't you?" The other martial artists looked at me with pity. I was a dead man. "Search him. Now," Yi Chi barked. A staff member stepped toward me, but I didn't let him get close. I leveled my spear at his chest. He froze instantly. The crowd gasped. They couldn't believe I was actually resisting. "You dare refuse?" Yi Chi's face twisted with rage as he stomped toward me. Before he could speak, I looked him in the eye, my face expressionless. "I am a student at Star City First High." That single sentence made Yi Chi stop in his tracks. He looked at my young face, then back at the mountain of beast ears. I could see the hesitation in his eyes. A student from First High who could kill that many beasts was a certified genius. He didn't care about offending the average martial artist. But offending a future powerhouse was a different story. His expression softened slightly, though his voice remained firm. My nephew is dead. I have to conduct this search. But I won't make you do it for nothing. Cooperate with me, give me some face, and I'll give you 10,000 blue star coins as compensation. How about it? I furrowed my brow, acting as if I were offended and debating whether to accept. Yi Chi's eyes narrowed. He held up 3 fingers. 30,000. I waited a beat, then gave a reluctant nod. Fine. The search was quick. The staff member checked me thoroughly and shook his head at Yi Chi. Fine. You're clear. Get out, Yi Chi said, waving his hand dismissively. He signaled someone to transfer the 30,000 coins to my account. I didn't rush. I stayed calm, took a slow shower, and changed into clean clothes before finally walking toward the exit. Seeing how composed I was, Yi Chi finally looked away, his suspicion of me completely gone. Keep searching. I heard him roar behind me. Nobody leaves until I'm satisfied. The moment I stepped out of the base, my heart started hammering against my ribs. My face was a mask of stone, but inside, I was reeling. Thank God I was careful. If I hadn't burned that grade B skill book before coming back, I'd be a corpse right now. Yi Chi was smart, but he would never imagine that someone could master a grade B technique to the perfect realm in just a few hours on the walk back. I hailed a taxi and watched the base disappear in the rearview mirror. I was officially a rank 1 martial artist now. My next stop was the Martial Arts Association to pass the official exam and get my hands on a breathing technique. I pulled up my status panel. Name, Su Hong. Talent, Eternal Unparalleled Blood Chi. 103. Mental Power, 23. Constitution, Mortal Body, 6%. Skills, Raging Sea Spear, Great Success. Thunderbolt Punch, Perfect. Vajra Punch, Perfect. Floating Light Palm, Perfect. Sky Step, Perfect. Martial Points, 534. My blood chi had gone up by 0.8 in 4 days. It made sense. I had spent every waking hour fighting for my life. But what really surprised me was my constitution. It had jumped from 3% to 6%. I realized it must have been the breakthrough to rank 1 that caused the jump. I felt a bit frustrated, though. A major breakthrough only gave me 3%. Without the system, reaching 100% would be impossible. No wonder special constitutions were so rare. I looked at my 534 martial points. It felt like a fortune. To reach mid-tier rank 1, I needed 200 blood chi. If I poured everything into it, I'd be halfway there. But between my blood chi, my mental power, and my constitution, these points were going to disappear fast. I took a deep breath. I had the money, I had the points, and I had the talent. My journey was just beginning. I needed to test a theory. I pulled up my status panel and funneled a single martial point into my constitution. The number shifted from 6% to 6.1%. I felt it immediately. A tiny surge of strength rippled through my muscles. It was subtle, but it was there. This was a game changer. Blood chi was just a benchmark for rank, but constitution was raw power. If I wanted to be a real fighter, this was where the real investment needed to go. The math was brutal, though. Every 0.1% cost me 1 point. To reach 100%, I'd need nearly 1,000 points. I tried the same with my mental power. It jumped from 23 to 23.1. Another 10-to-1 ratio. I had no idea how high my mental power needed to be to become a telekinetic, but I knew I needed to find out soon. I looked at my points and made a decision. Constitution was the priority. I dumped 300.5 points into it instantly. The effect was violent. Sitting in the passenger seat of the taxi, my body suddenly convulsed. It felt exactly like my rank 1 breakthrough, only more intense. My muscles bulged, stretching my skin until it burned. My clothes groaned under the pressure, the seams screaming as they threatened to snap. I transformed from a lean teenager into a mountain of muscle in seconds. My face stayed youthful and handsome, but my body looked like it belonged to a heavyweight champion. It was a terrifying contrast. The taxi driver caught a glimpse of me in the mirror and nearly swerved off the road. His face went pale, and his lips started trembling. Big brother, he stammered, his voice shaking. Whatever I did wrong, I'll fix it. Just tell me. The man was a pro, though. Even while terrified, he kept the car steady. I couldn't answer him. I was too busy feeling the raw, explosive energy coursing through my veins. I felt like I could punch a hole through a tank. I was leagues stronger than I had been 5 minutes ago. Slowly, the swelling subsided. My muscles relaxed, and I returned to my normal, slender frame. I looked down at my clothes. They were stretched out and loose now. I made a mental note to buy high-elasticity gear. If I kept doing this, I'd end up naked in the middle of the street. "I'm fine," I said, giving the driver a reassuring smile. "Sorry about that." "As long as you're okay, I'm okay," he muttered, letting out a massive breath of relief. I wasn't done. I put 200.5 points into blood chi, watching it climb from 103 to 123. Because my constitution had improved, my body handled the massive jump without any discomfort. Finally, I threw my remaining 34 points into mental power, bringing it up to 26.5. My mind cleared instantly. The exhaustion from days of hunting in the wilderness evaporated. I felt sharp, focused, dangerous. By the time I reached the Martial Arts Association building downtown, I felt like a new person. I walked inside, headed for the front desk, and asked for the location of the Rank 1 exam. As I turned to head toward the testing hall, I heard voices behind me. Familiar voices. "Master, my talent isn't bad, right? My injuries are gone, and I've already broken through to Rank 1. "It's decent," a deeper voice replied. "Just don't embarrass me during the exam today." I glanced back. It was Li Ming and his master, Jiang Ming. They were walking toward the same hall. I didn't linger. Li Ming's progress meant nothing to me. I turned and kept walking. "Wait," Li Ming muttered, staring at my back. "That guy looks familiar. Where have I seen him?" He shook his head, unable to place me, and followed his master to the check-in desk. When the receptionist pointed them toward the same hallway I had taken, Jiang Ming looked surprised. "A Rank 1 martial artist at that age?" Jiang Ming whispered. Li Ming frowned. His master noticed his reaction and immediately seized the chance to humble him. "See that? Don't get cocky just because you broke through. That kid looks like he's still in high school, and he's already at your level." "I just started training late," Li Ming snapped, his ego bruised. "If I had started at his age, I'd be twice as strong. Besides, real martial arts is about combat power. With my mastery of the Thunderbolt Punch, I could drop a student like him in one hit." Jiang Ming sighed. He had hoped the loss at the underground ring would have changed Li Ming, but the breakthrough had brought back all his arrogance. He knew if he pushed the subject, Li Ming would probably try to pick a fight with the boy just to prove a point. "Enough talk," Jiang Ming said. "Go take the test." I arrived at the testing area and found a spot against the wall. A few middle-aged men were already there, waiting their turn. They looked at me with a mix of awe and jealousy. For them, this exam was a desperate struggle they had failed multiple times. For a genius, like me, it looked like a walk in the park. Li Ming walked in a moment later. He saw me looking and gave a cold snort. He was clearly waiting for me to fail so he could feel superior again. An official stepped forward to announce the rules. The exam consists of 2 parts, blood chi and combat power. You need 100 blood chi to qualify. For combat power, we take the average of 3 strikes. If your score is over 1,000, you pass. The testing began. The middle-aged men went first. First candidate, Fanjia. Blood chi, 102. Combat scores, 992, 994, 1003. Average, 996. Failed. The room went quiet. The first guy had failed by a hair. The tension among the older candidates spiked. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes, tuning them out. Li Ming watched the failures with a look of pure contempt. To him, this was just a formality. He was looking at me, waiting to see if I was actually the real deal or just a kid who had hit a lucky growth spurt. Jiang Ming watched the young boy, wondering if he was truly confident or just hoping for a lucky break after a recent breakthrough. He stopped overthinking it. Either way, the kid wouldn't beat Li Ming. Part of Jiang Ming actually hoped the boy would outscore his student. It would be a perfect chance to humble Li Ming's growing arrogance. But then he looked at Li Ming and shook his head. He had trained the boy himself. It wasn't likely that some random kid off the street could just show up and surpass him. The group of middle-aged martial artists finished their session. Out of a dozen men, only 3 passed. The others didn't look devastated. They were used to it. They hung around the edges of the room, whispering and placing bets on whether the two younger guys would make the cut. They figured the older one, Li Ming, had a real shot since he had a teacher with him. As for me, they thought I was just there to test the waters. They called me a genius just for showing up at my age, even if I failed. Li Ming heard them. Being called a genius in the same breath as me clearly annoyed him. He stepped up to the testing area, and the room went silent. First came the blood chi test. The machine beeped. 105 points. Pass. Then, he moved to the combat power monitor. He took a deep breath and threw a punch. The air cracked with the sound of 3 sonic booms. The numbers on the screen blurred upward and finally locked in. Combat power, 1763. Holy crap. Is that real? One of the older guys shouted. 105 blood chi, but 1763 power? That's almost at the level of a mid-stage rank 1 martial artist. His technique must be at least grade C, another whispered. The kid is a monster. The older men looked stunned. They were in their 40s and couldn't even break 1,000. Yet this teenager had nearly doubled their strength on his first try. Li Ming's lips curled into a smug grin. He threw 2 more punches to finish his set. 1721, 1690. The staff member recording the scores blinked in surprise before announcing that Li Ming had passed. Li Ming walked back toward me, looking refreshed and superior. Your turn, he said with a smirk. The older martial artists leaned in, sensing the tension. They might not have been strong, but they were experienced enough to smell a rivalry. I opened my eyes and didn't even look at him. I walked straight past him toward the blood chi machine. Li Ming let out a sharp TCH at being ignored and crossed his arms, settling in to watch my inevitable failure. Jiang Ming watched me too, already planning to visit the top high schools later to find someone who could actually challenge Li Ming's ego. But his thoughts were cut short by a collective gasp. No way. Is the machine broken? How is his blood chi that hot? The older men were staring at the monitor, their eyes wide. Li Ming stood frozen, his mind going completely blank. Jiang Ming frowned, confused by his student's reaction, and looked up at the screen. His pupils dilated. Blood chi, 123. Jiang Ming gasped, rubbing his eyes to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. It was real. I stood there, calm and expressionless, while he struggled to process the number. I was over 10 points higher than Li Ming. Where the hell did a talent like this come from? Li Ming's face turned a sickly shade of green, then white. Remembering how he had just acted, he felt like a total clown. It doesn't matter, he told himself, his eyes fixed on me. Asterisk blood chi is just a foundation. Combat power is everything. I'll still beat him there. Asterisk. Even the official was dazed. It took him a few seconds to find his voice. Blood chi test passed. Proceed to combat power. Every eye in the room followed me as I stepped up to the heavy punching target. I looked at the padded surface, feeling a surge of anticipation. After my recent body tempering, I wanted to know exactly how much raw strength I had. Since I had 3 tries, I decided the first one would be a pure physical strike. No techniques, no skills, just me. I took a deep breath, crouching slightly like a tiger ready to pounce. Then, I exploded. My fist slammed into the target with a deafening boom. The impact was massive. The entire combat power machine, a heavy, bolted-down piece of equipment, was ripped from its spot. It skidded dozens of feet across the floor, wobbled violently, and crashed onto its side. The room fell into a deathly silence. Everyone was paralyzed. They stared at the fallen machine, unable to believe what they had just seen. Li Ming's face was ghostly. He had hit that target with everything he had, and it hadn't budged an inch. I had sent it flying across the room. The official snapped out of his shock and ran over to the machine. He reached out to right the monitor, curious to see if it had even registered the hit. The moment he saw the screen, his body jerked. He let go, and the machine crashed back down to the floor. He didn't even notice. He just stared at the numbers, his shoulders shaking. My God, he stammered. Is this for real? Move. Let us see, the other martial artist shouted, crowding forward. The official stepped aside, revealing the screen to the room. Jiang Ming and Li Ming pushed to the front. Combat power, 1862. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. 1862, someone yelled. That's higher than the other kid's best strike. I thought the first guy was a genius. But this kid is on another level entirely. Li Ming didn't say a word. He stared at the screen, his hands trembling. The pride he had carried his entire life was shattering. He couldn't understand how my power was so much higher than his. Jiang Ming was just as stunned, staring at my back with wide eyes. But then, one of the middle-aged men let out a trembling cry that made everyone freeze. Wait, that boy, he didn't even use a martial arts technique, did he? The realization hit the room like a physical blow. Everyone went still again, their eyes fixed on me in pure terror. I watched the crowd. The silence was heavy, thick with a shock that seemed to paralyze the room. They were picturing the same thing I was, the moment I struck that target. I hadn't used a single technique. No special breathing, no channeled energy, just raw, unrefined strength. The realization rippled through the martial artists. I heard the sharp, collective intake of breath. They looked at my back like I was some kind of monster. I could hear the whispers starting, frantic and low. I'd hit 1862 on pure power alone. That was higher than Li Ming's best strike, and he'd used everything he had. Jiang Ming, who had been merely stunned a moment ago, now looked completely lost. A visible shiver ran up his spine, and his face went pale. Beside him, Li Ming's legs finally gave out. His eyes went dark, and he collapsed onto the floor with a dull thud. First test complete, the official stammered. He swallowed hard, his voice filled with a new, deep respect. Please begin the second test. Every head in the room snapped up. They were all thinking the same thing. If I could do that with just my muscles, what would happen when I actually used a technique? How high could that number possibly go? I took a deep breath, feeling the power humming under my skin. I was satisfied. My body refining progress had given me more strength than I'd even realized. Most martial artists couldn't control the fundamental strength of their physique like I could. In time, if I kept this up, my physical body alone would be a weapon beyond imagining. Now, I thought, let's see what my actual limit is. I squared my shoulders and adjusted my breathing. I locked my eyes on the target. Then I lunged. Void-shattering finger. A terrifying surge of energy exploded from my hand. The air hummed with a violent vibration. The target let out a high-pitched, metallic groan, unable to withstand the pressure. A split second later, the entire thing shattered. Metal and padding sprayed across the room in a jagged explosion. The onlookers stood there with their mouths hanging open. I destroyed the testing equipment. The numbers on the monitor began to climb, blurring past 2,000 in a heartbeat. It didn't stop until it hit a final, staggering digit. 3,004. The room stayed silent for a long time. 3,000 was the benchmark for a rank 1 high-stage martial artist. I was only at the beginning stage, yet my combat power was already on par with someone at the peak of the rank. I can't believe it, someone whispered. This kid is a freak. A total monster. The older martial artists were trembling. Their faces were twisted in a mix of awe and fear. Jiang Ming looked like he'd seen a ghost. His voice went up 3 octaves as he sputtered. 3,004? That's impossible. Is he some kind of special constitution? He swallowed hard. In big cities like the demon capital, there were geniuses born with special physical traits that gave them insane power. They were the kind of people who could end a fight in a single blow. Seeing what I'd just done, Jiang Ming was convinced I was one of them. He looked down at Li Ming, who was still sitting on the floor, staring blankly at the screen. The kid looked like his soul had left his body. Jiang Ming's eyes twitched. He'd wanted to humble the boy, but he hadn't meant to destroy his spirit entirely. He stepped over and gave Li Ming a sharp slap across the face to snap him out of it. Li Ming, listen to me, Jiang Ming hissed. He's a monster with a special constitution. It's normal to be beneath him. Don't lose your mind over this. Your goal is the monthly exam at Star City High, not competing with a freak like this. I ignored them and looked at the smoking remains of the machine. The official was twitching. Do I have to pay for that? I asked. It was a bit awkward. I'd been so focused on testing my limits that I forgot the machine might not be able to take the hit. No, of course not, the official blurted out. The target is broken, I noted. Do you need to fix it for the 3rd round? No need. He shook his head frantically. Why would he fix it just to watch me blow it up again? You've passed. You're done. While I was finishing my test, Wu Linxian, the president of the Star City Martial Arts Association, was sitting in her office. She was scrolling through her phone, her brow furrowed with worry. To the world, she was a powerful leader, but she knew the truth. If Star City didn't produce some incredible talent this year, she was going to lose her position. The college entrance exams were coming up. Presidents from other cities were constantly bragging in their group chats about their genius students and their terrifying power. It made her head ache. Star City was usually ranked near the bottom of the province. We had talent, sure, but nothing that could compete with the top-tier cities. I'm losing this job, she sighed, leaning back in her chair. I'm definitely losing it. There was a frantic knock at the door. Come in, she said lazily. An official burst in, gasping for air, his face flushed. Wu Linxian frowned. What's the rush? Sit down. Have some water. She poured a cup for him and one for herself. The official didn't touch the water. President, he wheezed. Downstairs, at the rank 1 assessment, we found a monster. Wu Linxian sprayed her water across the desk. She stood up so fast her chair flipped over. She didn't even bother wiping her chin. A monster? What happened? Tell me everything. The official quickly explained. Rank 1 beginning stage. Pure physical power hit 1800. Then he used a technique and hit 3004. Wu Linxian stood frozen for a second. Then, a wild, manic grin spread across her face. To hell with them. They want me to step down? In their dreams. She let out a loud, booming laugh. Before the official could react, she blurred into motion. There was a thunderous crash as she sprinted straight through the office wall, leaving a human-shaped hole behind her. The official scratched his head, staring at the debris. She was so happy she forgot to use the door. Downstairs, I was being led toward the second floor by an incredibly eager staff member. The other middle-aged martial artists who had passed were following behind. They were being completely ignored, but they didn't seem to mind. They looked at me with the same reverence the staff did. In this world, talent like mine earned you everything. Follow me, the staff member said with a beaming smile. We'll get your official martial artist registration finished right away. I started up the stairs, leaving a shell-shocked Li Ming behind on the floor. I was just about to reach the landing when I felt a massive presence approaching. A thunderous crash echoed through the building. A figure blurred down the stairs from the upper floors, moving at a speed that defied logic. I felt a rush of air, and my vision blurred for a split second. When it cleared, a tall, curvaceous woman in her 30s was standing right in front of me. President, you came down yourself? The staff member stammered, his face pale with shock. He had sent someone to notify the head of the association about my results, but he clearly hadn't expected her to charge down like a hurricane. She couldn't even wait a single minute in her office. The woman, Wu Linxian, ignored the others. Her eyes scanned the group of candidates and locked onto me instantly. She gave me a small, knowing smile. Hello, I'm Wu Linxian, the president of the Xinqing branch of the Martial Arts Association. I'm Su Hong. I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I was genuinely surprised. I didn't expect the top official in the city to greet me personally. Without wasting any time, Wu Linxian took charge. She led me toward the registration area herself. Behind us, the middle-aged martial artists who had passed their exams just shook their heads in awe. They weren't even jealous. The gap between us was just too wide. In this world, a genius gets the red carpet while everyone else watches from the sidelines. Su Hong, looking at your age, you must still be in high school, right? Wu Linxian asked as we walked. Yes, I'm a student at Xinqing First High, I said. Wu Linxian froze for a second. Her expression shifted into something dangerous. First High? That old fox Li Chengshan. He told me he only had 2 mediocre rank 1 students this year. He was literally crying to me about how bad his talent pool was. She ground her teeth, looking like she wanted to go back and punch my principal in the face for hiding me from her. Under her personal supervision, my registration was finished in less than a minute. I was officially a rank 1 martial artist. It came with perks. I would receive a monthly stipend of 10,000 Blue Star coins and free access to a guidance technique to help me cultivate. 10,000 coins. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more than my uncle and aunt earned in a month. I felt a surge of relief. My first thought was that once I got home, I'd tell my uncle he could finally quit that grueling job and tell his boss to shove it. Wu Linxian was incredibly patient as she led me to the technique library. She wasn't cold or arrogant at all. Guidance techniques allow you to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, she explained softly. Different techniques focus on different attributes. For example, I practice the Sky Eye technique. It focuses on fire attribute energy. It strengthens my body and gives my attacks of burning property. I listened intently. This wasn't the kind of stuff they printed in our basic school textbooks. I used to think cultivation was just about breathing and energy, but there was an entire world of elemental mechanics I hadn't touched yet. Watch, she said. She opened her palm. A ball of intense, flickering flame erupted from her skin. The heat was so sudden it scorched the air, leaving behind a faint smell of ozone and burning. She clenched her hand into a fist, and the fire wrapped around her knuckles like a gauntlet. She threw a punch into the empty air. Boom. A flaming fist print shot forward, roaring toward the wall. Just before it impacted, she blew a soft breath, and the fire vanished instantly. My eyes widened. That kind of power was on a completely different level. I wanted that. Don't get too ahead of yourself, she cautioned, seeing my expression. Manifesting attributes externally is hard. Most rank 1 martial artists are lucky if they can get a tiny spark to show up on their fists. I nodded, my heart racing as she led me into a private testing room. There are 7 main attributes, she continued. Gold, wood, water, fire, earth, lightning, and wind. If we're talking pure destructive power, lightning is number 1. Gold is second, and fire is third. Lightning, I whispered. My eyes lit up. If I was going to fight, I wanted the strongest weapon possible. Wu Linxian laughed as if she could read my mind. Everyone wants lightning, Su Hong. But it's not a choice you make. It depends on your affinity. I went quiet, waiting for her to explain. She seemed impressed by my restraint. You can't just pick a technique, she said. If your body isn't compatible with the attribute, your progress will be slow and your power will be weak. But you shouldn't worry too much. You hit a power level of 1863 at the beginning stage without using any skills. That suggests you might have a special physique that hasn't fully awakened yet. Even if your affinity isn't perfect, your future is bright. President Wu, call me Sister Wu, she interrupted. Sister Wu, how strong is a special physique exactly? She went quiet for a moment, her face turning serious. Just know this. Those with special physiques are invincible among their peers. Fighting someone at a higher rank is as easy as drinking water for them. Invincible. Higher rank. My pulse quickened. If I pushed my body tempering progress to 100%, would that trigger a special physique? I needed more martial points, and I needed them fast. Anyway, she said, bringing out 7 colored crystal balls. These represent the attributes. You place your hand on them, and they light up. The more the crystal fills with color, the higher your affinity. Look, she placed her hand on the red fire crystal. It glowed brilliantly, with the red light filling about 4/5 of the sphere. My affinity for fire is 80%, she said with a hint of pride. Average martial artists hover around 20 or 30%. My 80% is why I'm a branch president in my 30s. She turned to me, her eyes full of expectation. Now your turn. I'm guessing you'll be around 90%. That's genius level. I was nervous. I walked up to the fire crystal and reached out. Wu Linxian held her breath. The moment my skin touched the glass, a blinding, violent crimson light exploded outward. In a fraction of a second, the entire crystal was completely saturated. It didn't just fill up, it looked like it was about to burst. The firelight flooded the entire room. It was blinding. Wu Linxian's face went from expectant to completely blank in an instant. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. The fire crystal wasn't just glowing. It was filled to the absolute brim. 100% affinity. Holy crap, Wu Linxian let out a sharp scream. She lunged forward and grabbed my shoulders, shaking me violently. Her eyes were burning with a terrifying intensity. Your fire affinity is 100%. Do you even understand what that means? I shook my head. I'm not sure. Her face was flushed with pure adrenaline. It means when you practice the Heaven's Eye breathing technique, you will absorb fire element energy with 0 waste. Your efficiency will be perfect. Not a single drop of energy will leak out. She was trembling now. Efficiency in cultivation is everything. Wu Linxian was considered a genius because her 80% affinity allowed her to reach rank 5 in her 30s. She only lost 20% of the energy she tried to absorb, but she had never seen a 100% affinity in person. They existed, sure, but only in places like the capital or the great martial hubs. Not here, not in Star City. I have a monster on my hands, she whispered, her voice thick with excitement. I saw her reach for her phone, probably wanting to brag to every other branch president in the province. Then she stopped. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. If the others found out, they'd try to steal me away. She couldn't let that happen. Su Hong, she said, her voice steadying. Forget the other tests. Stick with the fire technique. With this and your potential special physique, your path to becoming a powerhouse is guaranteed. I scratched my head. To be honest, I was curious. Can I try the others? Just to see. Wu Linxian looked at me like I was insane. If she had 100% affinity, she would have been dancing in the streets. She couldn't comprehend why I was hesitating. But she sighed and stepped back. Fine, try them, but I guarantee you won't find anything higher than that. I just want to be sure, I said. I reached out and touched the lightning crystal. A split second later, the room cracked with the sound of thunder. Blue light exploded, saturating the sphere instantly. Sparks danced across the glass. Wu Linxian's mind went blank. She stood there, frozen. Full again, she muttered, her voice cracking. It's freaking full again. She looked at me like I was a literal monster. I didn't notice her stare. I was staring at the lightning crystal, feeling a strange suspicion. My eternal peerless talent was no joke. Was it possible that I was perfect in everything? I moved my hand toward the wind crystal. Wait, you're still not satisfied. Wu Linxian stammered. That's lightning, the most aggressive element. What more could you? The wind crystal lit up completely. Wu Linxian looked like she'd been struck by a physical blow. Three attributes at 100%. I didn't stop. I touched the gold crystal. It turned a brilliant, solid yellow. The wood crystal glowed a deep, vibrant green. Wu Linxian started gasping for air. The water crystal filled with a deep blue. Her expression was starting to go numb. The earth crystal turned a solid, heavy brown. She had completely checked out. Her scalp was crawling with shock. There are only 7 elements of energy in the world, and I was a perfect match for every single one of them. It felt like a dream, a ridiculous, impossible dream. I pulled my hand back, feeling a bit conflicted. With my talent, I could train in anything. The problem was, which one should I pick? I scratched my head, looking troubled. Seeing my expression, Wu Linxian looked like she wanted to cough up blood. What are you looking so sad for? You have the ultimate choice. You can pick anything. That's the problem, I said, looking at the crystals. They're all perfect. Giving any of them up feels like a waste. She gritted her teeth so hard I thought they might break. You want them all? Don't be greedy, kid. Sister Wu, I asked tentatively. Can you give me the breathing techniques for all 7? Her eyes nearly popped out of her head. You want to cultivate 7 paths at once? No, absolutely not. She paused, her brow furrowing in thought. Wait, there actually isn't a rule against it. Probably because the people who wrote the rules never imagined someone like you existed. She looked at me seriously. Even if it's possible, your progress would be 7 times slower. Are you sure about this? I gave her a small smile. I'm not saying I'll do all 7 forever. I just want to try them out before I decide. If it's too hard, I'll just focus on lightning. Wu Linxian let out a long breath of relief. She was terrified I'd ruin my future by being stubborn. People had tried multi-cultivation before, and they usually ended up wasting decades of their lives for very little gain. She didn't realize that for me, the normal rules of time and effort didn't apply. I knew what she was thinking. In the past, people had tried to master multiple elements. They became invincible among their peers, even holding their own against rank 2 warriors. But it was a trap. They spent decades stuck at rank 1, unable to break through. No matter how strong you are for your level, a rank 1 can never defeat a grandmaster. Wu Linxian believed that with my 100% compatibility, I could become one of the strongest humans alive in 20 or 30 years if I focused on one element. If I chose 7, I might not even reach rank 3 before my life was over. Fine, she said, her voice heavy with caution. I'll give you all 7 breathing techniques. But don't be stubborn. If you hit a wall, let it go. I smiled and agreed. She sighed, handing over the manuals for all 7 elements. Stay here and practice, she instructed. If you have questions, ask. Try to get the basics down as quickly as possible. Thanks, Sister Wu, I said, sitting down with anticipation. I suggest you start with the sky eye technique, she offered. It's the fire element. I'm most familiar with it, so I can guide you. Once you get the hang of it, switching to lightning will be easier. I nodded and opened the sky eye manual. As I began to read, Wu Linxian stood to the side and pulled out her phone. She started a timer. When she had first learned this technique with her 80% compatibility, it had taken her 12 hours to reach the entry level. She figured that with my perfect compatibility, I might pull it off in 2 or 3. That speed alone would be enough to terrify the world. Sister Wu, I said suddenly. I think I've got it. She looked up, her face a mask of pure disbelief. Already? It hasn't even been. She glanced down at her phone. Her eyes went wide with horror. 34 seconds. It hasn't even been a minute. Are you joking? I think so, I said, scratching my head. I wasn't entirely sure what the standard was. I can feel the fire essence entering my body and merging with my blood. Is that it? That was exactly how it felt. I could see the color draining from her face. She looked like she was struggling to swallow. Try to control that fire essence, she whispered, her voice dry. Throw a punch. I did as she asked. I threw a straight punch into the air. As my fist snapped forward, a small, flickering flame danced across my knuckles. The sight of that flame seemed to blow a fuse in Wu Linxian's brain. She stood there, completely frozen, staring at my hand. Sister Wu, did I do it? I asked again. My voice snapped her back to reality. Her jaw twitched. She gave a mechanical, stiff nod. Yes, you're at the entry level. Internally, she was screaming. 34 seconds. It wasn't human. She wanted to slap herself for thinking it would take me 2 hours. She had tried to apply common sense to a monster who had perfect compatibility with every single element. She had no idea how high my ceiling actually was. In the last 30 minutes, her entire understanding of martial arts had been demolished. Entry level already? I muttered. That was actually pretty simple. Wu Linxian's eye began to twitch. I could tell she had a sudden, violent urge to hit me. Sister Wu, I asked, genuinely curious. How many minutes did it take you the first time? How many minutes? She repeated. She wanted to snap at me. She wanted to tell me that minutes wasn't a normal time frame for learning a breathing technique. But then she stopped herself. She realized that to me, 34 seconds was the new baseline. Asking if it took her a few minutes was probably me being polite, assuming she was a bit slower because of her 80% compatibility. She couldn't tell me the truth. She couldn't tell me it took her 12 hours, and everyone called her a genius. She had a reputation to protect. About 3 or 4 minutes, she lied, her face turning a bit red. Oh, I said, nodding innocently. She let out a massive breath of relief when I didn't push further. Then, a thought occurred to me. Sister Wu, what do you know about spirit readers? She froze. Her eyes nearly popped out of her head again. Don't tell me you're a spirit reader too, she gasped. She was genuinely terrified. If I had perfect elemental compatibility and I was a spirit reader, the other geniuses of my generation might as well give up and go home. No, I said with a dry laugh. I'm just curious. I want to know what it takes to awaken. Good, she exhaled. That's good. She walked away and returned with a device that looked like a high-tech helmet. This measures mental strength, she explained. Put it on. As I strapped it on, she continued. Nobody knows the exact trigger for awakening. Some people have weak mental strength and wake up overnight. Others are right on the edge their whole lives and never cross over. But generally, a spirit reader won't have a mental strength score lower than 100. I nodded. My system panel showed my mental strength at 26.5. I needed a lot more points before I hit that threshold. I had a long way to go. The skin finished. 26.5, she read. That's normal. Average human level. She looked relieved. She couldn't take any more shocks today. But when she looked at me, she noticed I wasn't disappointed at all. I was perfectly calm. She found herself admiring my composure. With talent like mine and a steady heart, there was no doubt I would become a powerhouse. Then, Her expression turned serious. Suhong, your monthly exam is tomorrow, right? Yeah. I'm surprised you know about that, I replied. When you take that exam, give it everything you've got, she said firmly. Don't hide a single thing. No holding back. I blinked. I was already planning to go all out, but her tone was intense. Why the emphasis? Is there something I don't know about? Wu Linxian's gaze wavered. She sighed, looking weary. She told me that the friction between the human race and the various alien races on the myriad world's battlefield was getting worse. A total war could break out at any moment. Because of this, the human powerhouses on Earth had reached a decision. Starting this year, every province would select its top geniuses for an intensive training camp before the college entrance exams. They were pouring massive resources into the younger generation to force them to grow up fast. Star City High was using the monthly exam tomorrow as the primary filter. Only the strongest would make the cut. I froze. I knew there were enemies outside our borders, but I didn't realize the situation was this dire. I always figured that if the sky fell, the giants would hold it up. I thought I had plenty of time. Even after getting my system, my only goal was to make life better for my family. The myriad world's battlefield felt like a distant fairy tale. Now, it was right in front of me. If the human race lost, everyone I loved would be slaughtered. My uncle, my aunt, and my siblings, they would all die. I rubbed my face, feeling a sudden, crushing sense of urgency. I couldn't let that happen. Sister Wu, thank you for telling me, I said firmly. I'll definitely be at that training camp. Wu Linxian watched me closely. She expected me to be panicked or overwhelmed. Instead, I processed the shock in seconds. She told me later that she felt a shift in my aura. One moment, I was a talented kid. The next, I looked like a man with the weight of the world on his shoulders. She smiled and pumped a fist in the air. Good luck, she said. Go hold up the sky for the human race. I left the Martial Arts Association as the sun began to set. I walked past a school where parents were waiting at the gates. I watched them squat down, laughing as they caught their kids in big hugs. I stood there for a long time, just watching, before turning toward home. I looked up at the sky. I remembered seeing my aunt applying medicine to my uncle's bruised back every night, feeling completely useless. My uncle always said that as long as he was there, our home wouldn't collapse. Well, I was strong enough now. I could take that burden from him. I could protect my little home. But if I protected my home, who was protecting the rest of humanity? I clenched my fists. I had to get stronger. I needed to be so powerful that if the human champions ever fell, I could step forward and hold up the sky myself. If anyone asked me to choose between my family and my race, I'd just kill whoever asked the question. I stopped daydreaming and hurried home. My family was waiting. With the money I'd brought home earlier, the atmosphere had changed. My aunt wasn't working late anymore. My siblings, Su Hai and Su Meng, were training like possessed spirits. They had seen the pride on our parents' faces when I brought home that cash, and they wanted to do the same. I'm back, I called out. The door flew open. My aunt looked at me with teary eyes, complaining that I looked thinner and asking if I was eating enough at school. I just laughed. I was actually much more muscular now, but to her, I'd always be the nephew who needed feeding. Uncle, I said seriously, you don't need to go to work anymore. I can support us. My uncle started to shake his head, telling me to save my money for my martial arts training. I cut him off with a grin. I'm a rank 1 martial artist now. I get a monthly stipend of 10,000 credits from the government. Seriously, stop working. The whole room went silent. They stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Before they could recover, I pulled out a card and set it on the table. There's over 400,000 credits in here. Use it. Wu Linxian had told me that the training camp used a contribution point system, not cash. Money was useless there. I decided to leave everything I'd earned from the beast hunt for my family, keeping only 30,000 for myself. 40,000. Suhai's eyes were literally sparkling. My uncle muttered, good, 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 over and over, his voice thick with emotion. My aunt bit her lip, tears streaming down her face. Seeing them like this made me feel like a kid again. That night, we went out to a restaurant and ate until we could barely walk. Back at the house, the kids begged me to teach them martial arts. With my eternal peerless talent, my understanding of techniques was at the peak level. I tried to teach them the void-piercing finger, but it was too complex for their age. I settled for the thunderclap punch instead. I broke it down simply. Because my mastery was so high, I knew exactly how to explain it. Within 30 minutes, both of them had mastered the basics. Su Ming threw a punch, and a small crack of thunder echoed in the room. "Whoa," she shouted, her face lighting up. "I learned a grade C technique." Su Ming's eyes curved into little crescents as she laughed. She looked adorable, but Su Hai was a different story. He stood there with his hands on his hips, laughing like a tiny supervillain. He told me he was going to be the school bully and show those kids who was boss. I immediately gave him a sharp flick to the forehead, warning him not to pick on his classmates for no reason. He acted obediently enough, but a few minutes later, I caught him on our aunt's phone, loudly picking fights and arranging duels with people. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I knew he was all talk and wouldn't actually hurt anyone, and besides, Su Ming was there to keep him in line. I headed back to my room and sat cross-legged on the bed. It was time to focus. When I asked Wu Linxian for those 7 different guidance techniques at the Martial Arts Association, I wasn't joking. I kept thinking about what she said, that someone who mastered all of them would be invincible among their peers, even capable of suppressing rank 2 martial artists while still at rank 1. The difficulty didn't scare me. With my system, I just needed to put in the work. I opened my status panel. My blood chi was at 123, and my talent was still eternal peerless. A new section for guidance techniques had appeared, showing the Heavenly Eye technique at level 1. I stared at that LV1 for a moment. Wu Linxian hadn't mentioned anything about levels. If these techniques could be upgraded, she definitely would have told me. It hit me then. Maybe I was the only one who could level them up. My eyes lit up. To test my theory, I pulled out the other 6 techniques and began to practice. With my god-tier talent, it didn't take long. By the time I opened my eyes again, the sun was starting to peek over the horizon. I checked the panel. Thunder, Heavenly Eye, Water, Earth, Wind. All 7 techniques were now at level 1. I could feel the change immediately. 7 different types of elemental energy were swirling through my veins, trying to merge with my blood chi. But there was a problem. The energies were repelling each other. Even though they lived in my body, I could only use one at a time. I held out my hand and summoned a spark of lightning. When I tried to add fire to it, the 2 elements clashed violently and vanished. I frowned. Now I understood why that martial artist Wu Linxian mentioned stayed at rank 1 for decades. The elemental rejection was a massive wall. I decided to start with lightning and fire, the 2 most aggressive elements. I failed over and over, the energy snapping back at me every time. But just as the sky turned fully bright, I tried one more time. Lightning flickered in my palm, then fire bloomed beside it. They fought, they hissed, but under my absolute control, they finally fused into a single, shimmering force. I let out a long breath, wiping sweat from my forehead. That was brutal. Even with my talent, it took hours just to fuse 2. I needed to see what this could actually do. I hurried out of the house and found a local martial arts gym. I wasn't going to use the public outdoor equipment this time. I'd already broken a rank 1 tester, and I didn't want to pay for damages. I found a rank 3 testing machine, which should have been more than enough for a rank 1 student like me. First, I tested just the lightning. I took a deep breath, balled my fist, and let the sparks fly. I slammed my fist into the pad. The numbers blurred. 2,343. My eyes widened. I hadn't even used a combat technique. That was just raw physical strength boosted by 1 element. During my official exam, I hit 1,863. This was a 500-point jump, putting me on par with a mid-stage rank 1 martial artist. Now for the real test, the lightning fire fusion. I focused every ounce of my will, merging the 2 powers in my fist. I threw the punch. There was a dull, heavy boom as I hit the machine. The numbers spiraled up and stopped at 3,041. I stood there stunned. 3,000 was the benchmark for a high-stage rank 1 martial artist, someone with at least 300 blood chi. I only had 123. This fusion was terrifying. I walked out of the gym with my heart racing. If I could do this with just 2 elements, what would happen when I fused all 7? I was going to be an absolute monster on the battlefield. Back home, I tried to add a 3rd element, but after 2 hours of zero progress, I realized my technique levels were too low. I needed more martial points to upgrade them, and the upcoming monthly school exam was the perfect place to earn them. A bit later, my aunt called me for breakfast. Soon after, I was walking Su Ming and Su Hai to school. They were still buzzing from the thunderclap punch I taught them, throwing tiny punches into the air as we walked. Once I dropped them off, I went straight to the teacher's office. "Oh, Su Hong, you're here," my teacher, Li Ming, said. He looked a bit surprised. "About those exam fees for the 5 elective categories, the principal said you can have a few extra days to pay." I blinked, surprised the principal even knew who I was. I reached into my bag and pulled out 30,000 credits. "Actually, I have the money right here, teacher." Li Ming looked at the stack of cash, then looked at me, his expression softening. He told me that since my aunt and uncle worked so hard for me, I needed to give it my all. He said if I studied hard, I might still have a chance at a martial arts university. I just nodded. When I got back to class, Chen Lin immediately jumped me, throwing an arm around my shoulder with a massive grin. "You've been gone for a few days, so you missed a lot," Chen Lin said, leaning in close. I raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "The elite class," he whispered, his voice thick with envy. "Principal Li has been giving them special treatment. He even got Chen Tian, the thunderclap punchmaster, to give them private lessons. A few of those guys have already broken through to rank 1. Some of them even learned the technique." He paused, sighing heavily. "But none of them compare to Qin Shan and Li Tuesday. I heard their thunderclap punch is already at the proficient level. They can trigger 3 sonic booms. The power is insane." Chen Lin looked out at the crowd of students, his shoulders slumping. "This monthly exam is going to be a one-man show for those two. The rest of us are just background noise, especially us in the regular classes. We aren't even in the same league." I started to say something, but our teacher, Li Ming, walked into the room. "Everyone, follow me to the field. It's time for the exam." When we reached the sports field, it was a sea of black hair and school uniforms. Thousands of students were gathered. Principal Li Chengshan stood on the high stage, waiting for the noise to die down. "Students," the principal began, his voice booming. "Today's exam is different. Because of the pressure on the front lines, the government has decided to establish a special training camp for young geniuses. The resources there are beyond your imagination: rare pills, high-level manuals, and even grandmasters serving as personal mentors." The crowd exploded. "A grandmaster? That was a rank 7 warrior. Our principal was only a rank 3. The top 3 students from this exam will earn a spot in the Star City training camp." The principal finished. The excitement turned into bitter reality for most. Everyone's eyes drifted toward the front of the pack, where the elite class stood. Specifically, they looked at Li Tu and Qin Shan. Those two looked completely calm. To them, the spots were already theirs. "Last time, you were a bit faster with the thunderclap punch," Qin Shan said, his eyes burning with competitive fire. "But in a real fight, I'm taking first place." Li Tu didn't even look at him. "I hope you're still that confident after I knock you into the dirt." Back in the regular class section, Chun Lin was practically drooling with jealousy. With those two monsters around, everyone else is just fighting for third place. And for us? Forget about it. I looked at Li Tu and Qin Shan for a moment, then looked away. I didn't say a word. "Begin the drawing process," the principal announced. "The exam starts now." As the students began drawing lots for their matchups, Principal Li stepped over to Qin Tian. He looked frustrated. "Still no sign of that genius? The one who hit 9 booms." Qin Tian shook his head. "Nothing. I thought you'd have found him by now. I've checked every student who left the gym that day," the principal sighed. "I even looked at the ones who dropped out of the martial arts track. Nothing. I'm starting to think he wasn't even from our school." He rubbed his temples, then changed the subject. "How do Li Tu and Chun Shan compare to the others in the upcoming camp?" Qin Tian thought for a second. "Mid to low tier. Some students from other cities have already reached mid-rank 1. A few are even high-rank 1. The principal winced. "So my school's reputation is just a hollow shell this year." He couldn't stop thinking about that mysterious student. If only that 9-boom genius belonged to him, he wouldn't have to worry. "Hey, Old Li, why the long face? Did your wife run away?" A mocking voice cut through the air. The principal's face darkened instantly. He looked up to see a man named Jiang Ming walking toward him, followed by 2 students. "Jiang Ming," the principal spat. What the hell are you doing in my school? They were old comrades, but they had spent their entire lives trying to outdo each other. Jiang Ming scanned the field, his eyes lingering on the elite class students before he smirked. I heard Star City First High was falling behind. Looking at these kids. Yeah, you're losing your touch, oldly. It's a bit embarrassing. Mind your own business, the principal snapped. My students could still beat your young city brats with their eyes closed. Jiang Ming's eyes lit up. He had been waiting for that. Is that so? I brought 2 of my disciples today. How about this? Once your exam is over, your number 1 student can have a friendly match with them. The 2 students behind Jiang Ming stepped forward. One was Li Yin, looking sharp and confident. The other was Li Ming, who looked calm and indifferent. After failing his previous warrior assessment, Li Ming had realized there were monsters in this world he couldn't beat, but he was certain he could still crush anyone at this school. Jiang Ming smiled like a cat that had caught a canary. My disciples aren't anything special, really. One just hit rank 1 and is only proficient in Thunderclap Punch. The other is just a mid-rank 1 with a great success level in the Angry Sea Spear technique. But hey, it should be a fair fight against your geniuses, right? The principal's jaw tightened. He knew exactly what Jiang Ming was doing. Li Tu and Qin Shan weren't at that level yet. He wanted to refuse, but Jiang Ming wasn't finished. Of course, Jiang Ming added, if your students are too weak, I'll understand if you want to back down. That was the breaking point. The principal's fist clenched. If he backed down now, he was admitting his school was trash. Fine, the principal growled. I'll let whoever takes first place play with your boys. My students have strong minds. Principal Li Qingshan barked, his voice stiff with pride. It won't be my kids crying when they lose. Jiang Ming just laughed. He didn't waste another second. He turned and led his 2 disciples toward the lounge, not even bothering to look at the students on the field. I knew why. He had already done his homework on Star City First High. He knew exactly who the talents were here, and he was certain none of them could touch Li Ming or Li Yin. The principal watched them walk away, his face turning a dark shade of bruised purple. He cursed under his breath, looking out at the students in the genius class with a heavy sigh. I could tell what he was thinking. He was praying that the mysterious genius who had triggered the 9 thunderclaps was actually one of his own. If that person stepped forward, he could shove Jiang Ming's arrogance right back down his throat. But he had already searched the school top to bottom. He knew deep down that the genius wasn't here. Little did he know, I was standing right in front of him. Down on the field, the drawing for the monthly exam matches had finished. Holy crap, Su Hong! Chun-Lin shouted, staring at my bracket. Your first opponent is a quasi-martial artist. The whole class turned to look at me, their eyes filled with pity. A regular student like me going up against a quasi-martial artist in the first round? It was a death sentence for my rank. It's okay, buddy, Chun-Lin said, patting my shoulder. I'll be joining you in the loser's bracket soon. Even our teacher, Li Ming, looked at me with concern. Give it a shot, Su Hong, but don't push too hard. If you get hurt, it'll ruin your training for the rest of the month. It's not worth it. A voice boomed over the speakers, cutting through the chatter. Match 665, Chen Peng, versus Match 666, Su Hong. Get to the ring immediately. I stepped onto the stage. Chen Peng was already there, a cocky smirk plastered on his face. You want to walk off on your own, he asked, or should I help you down with my fists? I didn't answer. Before the words had even fully left his mouth, I moved. The world became a blur to him. By the time he realized I wasn't standing where I started, he was already sitting on the hard ground outside the ring. Chen Peng stared up at the stage, his mind a total blank. What happened? Wasn't my opponent just a basic student? Referee, how the hell is that a normal student? Back in my class section, my classmates were frozen. Their eyes were wide, their mouths hanging open. I had just tossed a quasi-martial artist aside with a single, casual palm strike. Since when did old Su get so fierce? Chun-Lin stammered, his voice cracking. Even teacher Li Ming was stunned. He watched me walk down the steps, a look of genuine shock surfacing in his eyes. As the matches continued, the genius class students started sweeping through the competition. To them, the regular students were just speed bumps. Li Tu and Qin Shan were the stars of the show, ending every fight in a single move. No one was surprised. Not the teachers, not the students, and certainly not the principal. But on the other side of the brackets, I was doing the exact same thing. I moved through my opponents with effortless ease. Whether they were basic students or quasi-martial artists, it didn't matter. None of them could even react. One second they were ready to fight, the next they were sitting on the floor, wondering how they got there. My teacher, Li Ming, was blinking rapidly, looking like he had seen a ghost. Wait, is that really my student? The rest of the class looked like they were watching a horror movie. Chunlin's mouth was open so wide he could have swallowed a few eggs. As I kept winning, more and more eyes from other classes started shifting toward my ring. Every time I ended a fight, a wave of gasps followed me. Up on the observation deck, Principal Li Chengshan finally noticed. That kid, he's a fresh face. I didn't realize the regular classes had such a good sprout. He watched for a second, but his attention quickly drifted back to the genius class. However, Chen Tian, the rank 3 master, didn't look away. He stared at my back, his brow furrowed in deep thought. He felt a strange sense of familiarity, a nagging feeling that he had seen my movement somewhere before, but he couldn't quite place it. As the sun began to dip, the exam reached its final stages. Most of the regular students had been eliminated, while the genius class remained untouched. It was exactly what everyone expected. The genius class was the elite. Even their weakest members were monsters compared to us. Match 666, Su Hong, versus Match 28, Li Kaishan. To the stage. The crowd buzzed. Oh, Su Hong's run is over. Li Kaishan is from the genius class. Getting this far was impressive for a regular kid, but this is the end of the line. I heard Li Kaishan's blood chi is at 99. He's one step away from being a rank 1 martial artist. Su Hong doesn't stand a chance. I heard the whispers. They looked at me with pity, as if I was already a loser. To them, if I were actually strong, I would have been in the genius class from the start. Ignore those idiots, Su Hong. Kick his ass and make them shut up. Then, he leaned in closer, his voice dropping. But seriously, don't overdo it. He's genius class. There's no shame in losing to him. Teacher Li Ming patted my shoulder. With the strength you've shown today, you'll have no problem getting into a second-tier martial arts university. Just don't get hurt. He looked proud, even if he didn't understand how I'd gotten this strong. I understand, teacher, I said. I stepped onto the ring. Li Kaishan was already there, arms crossed, chin tilted high. He looked at me with a relaxed, confident grin. I saw your matches. Not bad for a commoner. He paused, his smile widening. Too bad you ran into me. Tell you what, I'll let you have 3 free moves. Below the stage, Chen Lin exploded. Look at this guy, acting like he's number 1 in the school. You're at the bottom of the genius class, you arrogant prick. Li Kaishan just shrugged. Even the bottom of the genius class is a level you regular students can't comprehend. He beckoned me with a lazy wave of his hand. Come on then, do your worst. I nodded. In an instant, I closed the distance. Li Kaishan's face paled. His eyes widened as he realized my speed was beyond anything he had anticipated. He tried to raise his arms to block, but it was too late. My leg cut through the air like a whip. One kick. He flew off the stage and slammed face first into the dirt. I lost, Li Kaishan muttered, his face pressed against the cold ground. He looked lost, his brain unable to process that a nobody from the regular class had just one-shot him. The entire playground went silent. The fight hadn't even lasted 3 seconds. Whether they were cheering for me or cursing him, every student looked like they had seen a ghost. They hated his arrogance, but they never actually thought I could win, let alone win like that. Is it over? Someone whispered. Was Li Kaishan really in the genius class? I feel like I could have kicked him off if he's that weak. Don't be stupid, another replied. Su Hong is the first regular student to take down a genius class member. This is huge. My class was in a state of total shock. Chen Lin was vibrating with excitement, but teacher Li Ming was the one who finally spoke, his voice trembling with realization. Su Hong, he's already a rank 1 martial artist. The words hit the class like a thunderclap. I wasn't just a good sprout anymore. I was a rank 1 martial artist, standing in the middle of a regular high school exam. Wasn't she just a martial apprentice a few days ago? The question hung in the air, thick with disbelief. My friend Chen Lin stood there with his jaw hitting the floor. He looked at me up on that stage like I was a complete stranger. A rank 1 martial artist had just emerged from the regular class. It was unheard of. On the spectator platform, Principal Li Qingshan's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He looked stunned. Then suddenly, his expression shifted to one of pure agony. He started slapping his thigh in regret. To him, I was a buried genius. If he had realized my potential sooner, he could have had Chun Tian personally teach me the Benlei punch. With my base strength, I could have challenged for the top 3 spots in the school and secured a place in the elite training camp. If only I'd found her sooner, he muttered, sounding like he'd just lost a winning lottery ticket. Beside him, Chun Tian's lip twitched. He looked at the principal, clearly annoyed at being treated like a tool for the school's prestige. But then, his gaze shifted to me as I walked off the stage. His eyes narrowed, filled with a deep, searching thought. My movements, my gaze, they felt familiar to him. He felt like he'd seen me somewhere before, but the memory remained just out of reach. The first round of the arena battles ended quickly after that. Only about a dozen students remained. Aside from me, every single student from the regular classes had been eliminated. I was the lone survivor, standing among the geniuses. The atmosphere shifted. I felt the weight of 100 stares. Li Tu and Qin Shan, the 2 top-ranked students, gave me a brief, surprised glance. But they quickly looked away. To them, beating Li Kaishan wasn't a big deal. They could do that in their sleep. No matter how strong I seemed, they didn't believe a nobody could actually threaten their hold on the top 2 spots. The other elite students who had mastered the Benlei punch were only mildly impressed. To them, Li Kaishan was weak and hadn't even learned the technique, so his loss was logical. However, those who hadn't mastered the punch yet looked at me with genuine fear. I was a new, dangerous variable. They started praying under their breaths, hoping the next round would pair me against someone who could actually take me out. It seemed the universe was listening. Match 666, Su Hong. Match 5, Chen Qian. To the stage. The crowd gasped. A wave of pity washed over the regular students. Chen Qian was ranked 5th in the entire school. He had broken through to rank 1 days ago, and more importantly, he had mastered the Benlei punch. He was a true contender for the training camp. Well, it was a good run, someone whispered. Getting this far from the regular class is already legendary. The elite students who feared me let out a collective sigh of relief. They were happy to see me go. They knew Chun Qian's style, his weaknesses, and his strengths. I was an unknown, and in a fight, the unknown is terrifying. Chen Qian, huh? What a shame, Principal Li Qingshan sighed, already writing me off. He made a mental note to transfer me to the genius class after the exams, assuming I'd lose this fight, but still show promise. Back in my class section, my teacher Li Ming was beaming. He didn't care if I lost now. I had already exceeded every expectation he ever had. But Chen Lin looked miserable. He watched me climb back onto the stage, feeling the gap between us growing into a canyon. Chen Qian didn't underestimate me. As we stood opposite each other, his face was set in a mask of grim determination. The referee gave the signal. Begin. Chen Qian didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, his feet driving into the stone with explosive power. He closed the gap in a heartbeat, his fist whistling through the air. As he swung, a sound like a crack of thunder echoed across the playground. He's using the Benlei punch right out of the gate, someone screamed. I didn't move. I didn't dodge. I didn't even flinch. I just raised my own fist and met his charge head-on. The crowd went wild. They thought I was suicidal. To meet a grade C martial technique with a basic punch was madness. The referee even tensed up, ready to jump in and save my life. Chen Qian saw me coming and didn't pull back. He committed everything to that strike. Then, our fists collided. A dull, heavy thud echoed out. The students leaned forward, waiting to see me fly off the stage. But I didn't move an inch. It was Chun Qian who recoiled. He stumbled back, his boots skidding against the edge of the platform. A low, pained groan escaped his throat. The crowd went silent as they looked at his hand. It was a bloody mess. Skin was torn, and blood dripped steadily onto the stage. What just happened? The confusion was total. How could a basic punch overpower the Benlei technique? My teacher was frozen. Chen Lin was shaking. Even the top 2, Li Tu and Chen Shan, finally looked at me with real, cold apprehension. Up on the platform, Principal Lee kicked his chair over as he stood up. He grabbed the railing, his eyes locked on me. "Chen Tian," he hissed. "Did you see that?" Chen Tian nodded, his face grimmer than I'd ever seen it. "She didn't use a single technique," he whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of shock and awe. "That student of yours, she has a special constitution. Her raw physical strength is insane. It's stronger than most mid-stage rank 1 warriors." Principal Lee swallowed hard. Then, a slow, manic grin spread across his face. He started laughing. A special constitution. In my school, he was ecstatic. He had been worried that his top students were only average compared to the rest of the city, but now he had me. A powerhouse. "Don't get too happy yet," Chen Tian warned, cutting through the principal's joy. "She's from the regular class. Her techniques are probably bottom tier. No matter how strong she is, without a proper move set, she'll hit a wall." But Chen Tian wasn't finished. He pointed out the harsh reality. If I ran into a student who could condense elemental attributes, my raw strength wouldn't be enough. My techniques were bottom tier. I was at a massive disadvantage. Because of that, my chances of making the top 3 for the training camp were still a total mystery. There was no way I could stand against Li Tu, who had already mastered the Ben Lei punch to the proficient level. Principal Li's face fell. He looked worried, his brow furrowing deep as he thought about the missed opportunity. Up on the stage, the referee kept calling names. Students cycled through matches, and winners were decided one after another. Then came the next draw. The students who had won their previous rounds weren't smiling. They were terrified. I could see them whispering, praying to any god that would listen that they wouldn't draw my name. Principal Lee was just as tense. He wanted me to get a weak opponent. He didn't want the school's only special constitution to get knocked out before the training camp. Then, the referee's voice rang out. Su Hong versus Chen Shan. Principal Lee's vision went dark for a second. Of all the people I could have faced, I pulled Chen Shan, one of the top 2 students in the entire school. Chen Shan wasn't just strong. He had already mastered guidance techniques and could condense elemental attributes. His Ben Lei punch was at the proficient level, and his vitality was a staggering 120 points. To the principal, this wasn't a fight. It was a funeral. "It's over," he groaned, looking completely defeated. On the other side of the arena, the genius students from the elite class were suddenly grinning. They had been worried, but now they felt safe. Chen Xian was strong, sure, but he couldn't compare to the gap between the top 2 and everyone else. They figured I might have beaten Chen Xian, but there was no way I was touching Chen Shan. All eyes turned to Chen Shan as he stepped forward. He took a deep breath, feeling the pressure. He looked at me, his eyes solemn and heavy. Feeling weak, Li Tu teased from the sidelines. Chen Shan didn't bite. "I'm just surprised, that's all. Once I beat Su Hong, you're next." Li Tu just smiled. "I'll be waiting." Chen Shan didn't waste another word. He walked toward the platform. Down in the crowd, my homeroom teacher, Li Ming, was speechless. He never imagined one of his regular students would make it this far, let alone challenge the school's second-best fighter. My friend Chen Lin looked like he was having a stroke. He couldn't believe it. He actually slapped himself across the face to see if he was dreaming. "Ouch. Okay, not a dream," he muttered, clutching his stinging cheek. I stepped onto the stage. Chen Shan stood opposite me, his expression turning deadly serious. "Begin," the referee shouted. Chen Shan moved instantly. He blurred across the stage, closing the gap in a heartbeat. He threw a flurry of punches, and I heard 3 distinct cracks of thunder echoing in the air. Proficient level, I thought. My eyes lit up. I didn't use any fancy moves. I relied purely on my physical power, meeting his fists with my own. Asterisk bang. 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 Asterisk. The sounds of our collision were heavy and dull. We stood our ground, trading blows in a stalemate for 10 seconds. Chen Shan started to lose his patience. He couldn't believe I was keeping up. "Li Tu, watch closely," he roared. "I was saving this for you." Suddenly, his fists glowed with a flickering, searing orange light. Flames erupted from his knuckles as he swung his Ben Lei punch. The crowd gasped. Attribute release. He can manifest fire. Fire was incredibly destructive, second only to lightning. Chen Shan had been hiding a massive trump card. Even Li too looked surprised. Principal Li sighed, his hope fading. He thought I was done for. He started planning how to beg the city lord for a special entry permit for me, since he didn't want my talent to go to waste. Old Li, look, Chen Tian suddenly shouted, pointing at the stage. Principal Li looked up, and his pupils shrunk to pinpricks. Down you go, Chen Shan screamed, throwing a flame-wrapped punch straight at my face. I felt a pang of regret. I had wanted to see how far my raw body could go against a genius like him, but he was too impatient. We had only been fighting for seconds, and he already went all out. Pity, I whispered. I threw a punch to meet his. But this time, I didn't hold back. Blue arcs of electricity danced across my skin. Lightning surged from my fist. Boom. The moment our fists touched, my lightning swallowed his flames whole. Chen Shan's face went blank. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Before he could even process the shock, the sheer force of my strike hit him like a freight train. He was sent flying backward, soaring off the platform. He hit the ground hard and went limp, completely unconscious. It happened in a flash. The entire arena went silent. Students stood there with their mouths hanging open, unable to find words. This. Principal Li was stuttering, his tongue tied in knots. Lightning attribute. Chen Tian stared at me, his voice trembling with disbelief. He shook his head slowly. A special constitution with immense strength, and the most powerful offensive attribute, lightning? Her talent is terrifying. Did you see that, Chen Tian? Lightning. Principal Li finally found his voice. He was practically vibrating with excitement. He didn't care about the student who had mastered the technique anymore. He had found something better. He had found a monster. You really are lucky, Chen Tian admitted. Then he paused. But did you notice? She still hasn't used a single martial technique. Does she not know any? Who cares? Principal Li's smile was so wide it looked like it would split his face. If she doesn't know them, we'll teach her. She just beat Chen Shan. She's going to the training camp. That's all that matters. Fair enough, Chen Tian agreed. His own curiosity piqued. He wanted to see how fast I could learn compared to the others. Below the stage, medical staff rushed to Chen Shan. The students were in an uproar. I thought she was a dark horse, but she's a freaking dragon, someone yelled. She crushed Chen Shan. Li Tu is next. For years, the top 10 had always been the elite class. The rankings never changed. But now, a student from the regular class was about to take the throne. It felt like a dream. My classmates were frozen in shock. My teacher, Li Ming, looked like his brain had short-circuited. Amidst the chaos, under the care of the medics, Chen Shan slowly opened his eyes. Chen Shan opened his eyes, his gaze blank and hollow. It took him a few seconds to remember where he was and how he had ended up on the floor. He looked up at me as I walked off the stage, his expression a tangled mess of emotions. He had given it his all, yet he still lost. I could see the realization hitting him. To him, I was a monster. He sighed, finally accepting his defeat, and slowly stood up to return to the elite class section. Li Tu, Chen Shan muttered as he sat down. We've been competing for the top spot all this time, but we never expected a dark horse like her to show up. Li Tu let out a short, confident laugh. A dark horse? So what? Chen Shan stared at him, confused by his arrogance. Why are you still acting tough? You and I both have the rushing thunder punch at the proficient level. If I couldn't beat her, what makes you think you can? Li Tu's smile only widened. If being proficient isn't enough, then I'll just have to be better. Chen Shan froze. He took a sharp breath, his eyes wide with shock. You don't mean you've reached the subtle level? Li Tu didn't say a word. He just kept that smug, winning smile on his face. Chen Shan's expression went dark. He thought he had been hiding a trump card, but it turned out Li Tu was hiding something much bigger. Bitter resentment washed over him. If Li Tu really had reached the subtle level with the rushing thunder punch, the final match between him and me was no longer a guaranteed win for me. It was anyone's game. The referee's voice boomed through the arena, calling Li Tu to the stage. His opponent was the student ranked 6th in the entire school. The crowd started whispering immediately. Everyone knew Li Tu would win, but they wondered how long it would take. I had finished my fight with Chen Shan so quickly that the bar was set high. Some students argued that since I beat Chen Shan, and Li Tu was supposedly on the same level as him, I was the obvious winner. But before that student could even finish his sentence, a sound like a crack of silent thunder erupted. The entire arena went dead silent. A second later, a body crashed into the stands. It was the sixth-ranked student. His eyes were rolled back in his head, completely unconscious before he even hit the ground. The crowd gasped in unison. Holy crap! How fast was that? It wasn't even 5 seconds. Did you see that? Li Tu's rushing thunder punch is definitely at the subtle level. That's not all. Look at his fists. A sharp, golden light had flickered around Li Tu's hands. He hadn't just mastered the technique. He was manifesting the metal element. In terms of raw lethality, the metal element was just as deadly as fire, second only to my lightning. The students were stunned. They had already crowned me the champion in their minds, but Li Tu had just slapped them all across the face with a display of terrifying power. With a subtle level technique and metal element manifestation combined, was I even a match for him? The final was shaping up to be a clash of titans. Up on the observation deck, Chen Tian looked surprised. The subtle level? This kid is progressing faster than I thought. Principal Li rubbed his chin, a grin spreading across his face. On one side, we have a subtle level technique and metal manifestation. On the other, we have a special constitution with immense strength and lightning. This is going to be hard to call. He was thrilled. Li Tu had given him a surprise he hadn't expected. As the tournament progressed, Li Tu and I continued to draw lots. After seeing what we were capable of, most of the elite class students simply forfeited when they were matched against us. It wasn't until the semifinals that two brave souls from the elite class decided to actually fight, hoping to see how long they could last. Two dull thuds echoed through the hall. Both students were blown off the stage instantly. They didn't stand a chance. Finally, the moment arrived. The final match. Su Hong versus Li Tu. The referee's voice was high-pitched with excitement as he made the announcement. The atmosphere in the arena reached a fever pitch. Every student was on their feet, eyes locked on the two of us as we walked toward the center of the stage. This was it. The ultimate showdown. Go for it. Su Hong, someone screamed. Show the elite class that a regular student can take the crown. Kill her, Li Tu. Protect our rank, others shouted back. The crowd split into two camps. The regular students were red-faced and screaming, waving their fists in the air. My classmates were the loudest of all. Chen Lin had even stripped off his shirt, swinging it over his head like a madman while howling at the top of his lungs. Even my teacher, Li Ming, was caught up in the energy, his hands clenched into fists and his eyes full of hope. On the other side, the few dozen elite students tried to cheer for Li Tu, but they were completely drowned out by the sheer volume of the rest of the school. Up on the stands, Principal Li watched with a nostalgic smile. To be young again, he sighed. He turned to the martial artist beside him. Who do you think takes this, Chen Tian? Chen Tian paused, thinking it over. Su Hong's physical strength is monstrous, but Li Tu has pushed my rushing thunder punch to the subtle level. If we're talking about the future, her potential is higher, but right now,